Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
And the Kraken win it on the far side. To the near boards, Burakovsky. Bodied off by Stevenson. Pops loose to the circle. Stone starts it out. Eichel shoots and scores! Eichel from Stone, 4-1 Vegas. Empty netter with 1:15 to play in the third period.
Here's the 2-1. Swinging a high deep drive left field. He ripped it. Wallner turning. See you later. That gets into the second level. That is a 3-run shot by Jose Abreu.
Ready on the 1-2.
Garcia hits this one high and deep to left. Really high, really far, and gone. Adolis Garcia. And the Texas Rangers now lead it 6-0 in the second inning.
You know, when Rink walks in the gym, when Josiah says something, you know, those guys all listen. You know, they've been a part of postseason play. You know, obviously we want to take that next step this year, and we're going to have a chance because of the makeup of, you know, those guys, especially, you know, Rink and Josiah. At their positions, because when they talk, I mean, that, and I'll let them tell, you know, maybe to your question, Wilson, you know, am I approaching it any differently? You know, you do have a little bit different approach when one of those guys wants to say something, you know, where you may step aside and step out of the huddle and just let those guys talk for a couple minutes and maybe figure some things out. You know, and Josiah and Rink, anytime they ask, Coach, go get a couple words in. Absolutely.
Good morning here on a Wednesday on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Anna Bellinghausen joining me here on a Wednesday. Anna, how are you this morning?
Good. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. We've got a terrific show for you here today. Obviously, we are going to be talking quite a bit about all of your favorite things here. You heard Fred Hoiberg kind of chiming in from Big Ten Media Days. We'll talk to Isaac Trotter at 9 a.m. He was covering those media days at Big Ten. He's also the national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports. So we'll talk to him a little bit about a lot of things, I imagine. We'll start things off with Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7 at 8 a.m. We will talk to Andy Kendeigh at 8:30 from KETV, and then we'll wrap things up with our very own Avarie Howard at 9:45. You and Avarie were at Summit League Media Days yesterday. How was that?
It was amazing. So it was the first time they had done this event in person at the Denny Sanford Premier Center, which is, of course, where the Summit League tournament is played.
Up there in Sioux Falls.
Yep, up in Sioux Falls. So it's a men's and women's tournament, which is unique. Not all college basketball tournaments are that way for conference time. So
yeah, most of them are done separately.
Right,
yeah.
in different locations. But this one's really unique in the fact that both men and women go to that championship. And it was just a really awesome media day. So Josh Fenton is the commissioner, and he just talked to us about the vision of the Summit League and being a mid-major and understanding how college basketball is obviously an ever-changing landscape with the conferences and whatnot, but the Summit League seems super dedicated to how they want to present themselves. And, you know, you want to do the things that show you're going to be successful in the future, whether you believe it or not, right? You're always going to do that. So putting those student athletes on a platform like that, it was basically set up like Big Ten Media Days is how I would compare it to a different media day. So really high level stuff. I mean, all the players and coaches we talked to were awesome. Of course, getting to talk to Omaha was great with Carrie Banks. And then we ended up talking to Coach Crutchfield. So Avarie and I did a show along with our other analyst, Missy Heydrich, who's a former K-State guard and then works up at Midco in South Dakota. So she helped out quite a bit with just the X's and O's part. So we talked to every women's basketball team up there. And it's interesting. I mean, the Summit League has so much talent, but I mean, being a mid-major doesn't always get as much love, but I think looking through all the non-conference schedules, they're playing quite a few Power 5 teams between everyone in the Summit. So I think you'll see more of them in the top 25 in the coming years for sure on both the men's and women's side. But I would say both sides of Omaha men's and women's basketball are really looking up in the next year. And both head coaches are kind of getting more years under their belt. Crutchfield in his second, and then Carrie Banks, I believe this is her third or fourth. So it's it's really just impressive to see the growth and development of both programs and just the league in general. And I love it for mid-majors. I'm a big fan. I went to UNO, so it's it's great to see.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously being a mid-major in today's Division I college landscape is kind of, it can be kind of a scary place
for sure.
With the way, conference realignment with college football has really shifted the attention towards kind of the major conferences in a way that is even more aggressive than it was. It was always shifted that direction, but it's gone really dramatically even further that way. And, I kind of appreciate the self-awareness that the league has shown. And, there's not that there's limitations in what you can be, but there has to be some realism into what you are, right?
And just the schools that are a part of it, and obviously TV deals are a huge part, and they have a great deal with Midcoast Sports, which is up in the Dakota areas mostly, and then also they have games on CBS too, so they're getting there, right?
Yeah.
Like all the teams are definitely putting each other on the map, and that does start with basketball. And Josh was super upfront about that, their commissioner. He was basically saying, hey, we are putting basketball at the forefront and we understand that, but we think this can be something that rises all tides, right? So you need one sport in the Summit League that can do that because there isn't football, right? So basketball has to be it. And I mean, you could say the same for the Big East. I wouldn't quite put that as a mid-major, of course, with the teams that are in it, but
no, but it's unusual as a basketball-centric conference.
Correct. It's different, and those conferences have to honestly just think differently about what they do because they don't have football.
Well, and that's one of the advantages that Josh Fenton brings to the table, right? Is he's coming from the NCHC, where he did have to kind of look at things differently. A lot of those programs in the NCHC are like hockey first programs, right? Which is again unusual for the current college landscape, and so. You would look at that and be, okay, maybe that's not a total fit in terms of what the Summit League maybe needs, but it seems like they identified, hey, he's had success identifying and kind of helping a league flourish that isn't that isn't a football first league. Maybe he can do that with us as well with basketball.
Totally. And they just also launched the Summit League Network. So they're getting there, right? They're doing all the things that a conference needs to do to be successful. It's just going to take time.
Sure.
And it's going to take a couple more March Madness runs. I mean, you saw Oral Roberts in the College World Series.
Yeah.
That's crazy to think about a mid-major program making it to the final 8 teams in college baseball, one of the hardest tournaments ever.
Yeah.
Right, with the competition you have to face. And I mean, it's just really impressive to see what they've done. And again, like support mid-majors as much as you can. Have a favorite mid-major team and support them and wear their gear, go to their games because the support means so much to those student athletes. Like just seeing their faces light up and the coaches' faces light up when we're talking to them and knowing things about them. Just like they're thanking us for doing our research on the teams.
Yeah, for just knowing what's going on.
Yeah, just knowing about them, knowing what's going on, just having that mutual respect because they don't get all the attention all the time. So I think it's really important just to support those mid-major schools. And it was just very rewarding to be up there and just be a small part of that media day.
Well, and I've always had a soft spot in my heart for mid-majors, obviously growing up in Omaha where Creighton was the mid-major when I was growing up. And obviously they've moved on to the Big East, but it's at kind of around that same time, Omaha made their transition into Division I and kind of took the place as the mid-major Division I team in Omaha. Speaking of which, Frankie Fiddler made all Summit League first team preseason, which is awesome.
Love that kid.
Very well deserved, incredible basketball player. But, there is this kind of romantic notion about mid-majors,
100%.
right? It's the Cinderella and March Madness. And, when I was growing up, the bracket buster thing that ESPN started doing was one of my favorite things of the year. You get showcased on ESPN and on the big networks and in these marquee matchups that you normally wouldn't get from those types of teams. And so, it's just because Creighton has moved on and grown and deservedly so, right, doesn't mean that kind of nostalgia for mid-majors
100%. There's just something special
ever goes away, right?
About watching Creighton, Drake, or Wichita State. Like you just can't replicate that anymore.
And listen, don't get me wrong, I'm not
we're not complaining about playing UConn.
I'm not missing any trips to like Peoria and Carbondale anytime soon. Like I will take Chicago and New York over that for sure. But there is, the NCAA men's basketball tournament is my favorite sporting event in the world.
100%.
It is the thing that I care about the most. It is Christmas for me. Like I can't even. So when 2020 happened, right, and they canceled the tournament. My wife and I had only been married for 6-ish months. We got married in summer of 2019. And so, like, she knew that I cared about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, when the tournament got canceled in 2020, I was visibly, like, shaken as if someone I knew and loved had died.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't understand what's happening right now. You're upset, but is it that big of a deal? And I was like, Natasha, this is the thing I care about outside of like family and friends and dogs, the thing I care about most in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, imagine that Christmas lasted for 4 days, because she loves Christmas. It's her favorite thing. I go, and imagine they were just like, hey, we're not doing Christmas this year. Like, how would you feel? And she goes, oh, okay, I get it. Like I was to the point of almost like tears because they canceled the NCAA tournament. It is I was like, I have to wait a whole nother year. I think, because at the time you're like, I don't know what this looks like. That was March 2020.
Right.
You're like, I hope a year from now this thing is over and done and we can watch the tournament again. But so that, I mean, I think that's where, besides Creighton, a lot of my love for mid-majors comes from, because all the stories that we talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's Gonzaga, who has turned themselves into a major program while still playing in a mid-major conference, or the Jimmer Fredette run, or Steph Curry. Like, that's where I fell in love with Steph Curry.
Right.
Like, that's, you'd be challenged to call Davidson even a mid-major. Like, that's, they get called a low major a lot of the times there, right? And my favorite basketball player probably ever, I discovered because this mid-major team made a run through the NCAA tournament. And so, like, is there any Steph Curry's playing in the Summit League? No, there's no Steph Curry's playing anywhere else. Like, that doesn't exist. Okay. But like, Frankie Fiddler's a great basketball player. He's super fun to watch, right? Like, there were people all over the country that hadn't ever watched Doug McDermott until they went into the Big East.
And probably fell in love with the way he played too.
Yeah.
That weren't even Creighton fans whatsoever.
And not just him, but the way the whole team played, right? That team was so much fun, the way they played. And, that's kind of where the whole let it fly thing was born, was out of teams like that. And so that's all just to say, like, I understand there's other things that command your attention, but mid-major basketball is incredible to be a part of.
And the Summit League tournament, again, is a blast up there. I think it's one of the best tournaments just in general for conferences. And
it's a super short road trip from here. You just go to Sioux Falls. What is that, like 3.5?
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours, see? It's not even that bad. Like, it's closer than KC, right? Like, that's I'm really hoping to make it up to the Summer League tournament this year. And I hope Omaha has a good year. I mean, I think they were picked to finish 7th.
Yeah, so Omaha men's, and then the women's side I believe was 6th, but it's funny though, because the women's team has gone to back-to-back championship finals, and last year they were picked 10th in the preseason polls, and then ended up going to the final and getting beat by SDSU, which was a great team, and had like generational players on that team, right? And went into March Madness and won a game even, and almost won a second. So, I mean, you just never know, and that's what I love about that tournament, because they bring every team. It's not like only a certain half go or whatever it was in the past, right? Everyone qualifies, and anything can happen, because it's been a 2-bid league in the past, just given
on the women's side.
On the women's side, because of SDSU and South Dakota being in the top 25 at one point or the other. But typically, I mean, it is a 1-bid league. And I think that's what makes those tournaments so special, because, in the Big East tournament, half those teams know they're already going to March Madness, right? So they're not necessarily playing for everything on the line. Of course, everyone wants to win a championship.
No, but the stakes of that specific tournament are lower.
Yeah, the stakes of that tournament are for sure lower. It can make or break at some points, but I mean,
there's a couple teams that are on the bubble that need to make a run.
Need it a little bit for a resume builder. But when you look at a mid-major, typically it is 1 bid, right? It's do or die time.
Well, especially so, even the teams that are on the bubble in the Big East, right? They had plenty of opportunities to play their way into the tournament, right? Without needing the conference tournament, without being on the bubble. Yeah. With mid-major teams, and I remember this very well as a Creighton fan watching in the Missouri Valley, which even they sometimes got multiple bids, but not always, was you could have a incredible season. And if you don't still perform in the conference tournament, sorry, you're
like
in the NIT.
It's like a mini March Madness.
It is. It really is. Like that conference tournaments are sort of part of that whole
It's
fun.
basically a playing tournament.
It is.
Honestly.
With these mid-major tournaments, they're like the wild card round we just saw in baseball, right? Where you've got this limited opportunity to continue your season. And so there are the stakes at these Summit League tournaments, the mid-major tournaments are frankly so much higher than they are at the major conference tournaments where you had all year to play yourself in, right?
It's a blast.
Honestly, that is one of my, and I know it's October 11th and we're talking about college basketball, but we love college basketball. Get used to it, okay? There's plenty of football to talk about. We will get to football, I promise. But one of the big things that is my pet peeve about March Madness is it seems like at some point they shifted from, hey, we're going to look at some mid-majors and whatever and try and get more of those teams in the tournament to, well, the strength of schedule of these sort of mediocre Power 5 teams is so high that it boosts their metrics and things like that, where you end up with an 18-13 major conference team. It's like, hey, they had 31 opportunities to prove that they deserve to be here.
And you're taking out a 21 win team from
not even a 21, like a 26 win team, right?
A 26 win team from the MAC.
There's been 26 and 27 win St. Mary's teams that don't make the NCAA tournament because their strength of schedule is not high enough. It's like, guess what? Nobody wants to play them. No major conference teams want to play St. Mary's because they're not going to have a high enough RPI at the end of the season or whatever they call it, net ranking now at the end of the season. Sorry, I'm old. I'm going to call it RPI till I die probably. But they don't have a high enough RPI at the end of the season to make it a quality loss if you lose. But there's a really good chance you could lose to them because they're a good basketball team. Yeah. It's the same problem Creighton found themselves in for years. And so it's like nobody wants to schedule you.
No.
And so you are in this place where it's almost impossible to get your strength of schedule high enough to be able to get a at-large bid, but you're in a conference where you have to play Gonzaga every year, and you're probably not winning that conference tournament. And so I think that's my one pet peeve is the NCAA kind of gives those teams a disservice. I'd rather see St. Mary's or South Dakota State or North Dakota State or whoever. It's like, this was several years ago, but that like Trae Young Oklahoma team started off super hot. I think they finished the year like 19-13. They weren't good. They had 32 opportunities to show they deserved to be in the big dance. And they just showed they didn't I think they were like 5-12 down the stretch. They were terrible down the stretch, and they still got in the NCAA tournament. I think it was at the cost of a team like St. Mary's. And I'm just like, I don't need to see those teams again. I need to see these teams. I need to see the Summit League teams. I need to see West Coast Conference teams. I need to see Missouri Valley teams. I've seen Oklahoma 100 times this year. They're not good. Just like, let's get over that. Let's give these teams an opportunity. And so I hope they can fix that. And honestly, I hope the exposure that things like the Summit League Network and stuff like that sort of allow voters or allow the committee to see these teams a little 100%. Bit more.
Yeah. And it just gives them more of a platform because it is important because the voters and everyone on the committee does have eyes, right? So they're looking on social media, they're looking for these games, and it's harder if they're not as accessible. And I think that's one of the points that Josh made was just how can we put our athletes out there more, and not only in basketball but in soccer and every other sport, because it's so important to uplift everyone, but also make sure you have the platform and the ability to take all of the content between every sport and put it all in one place so it's easy for people to find it, whether you're a fan or whether you're on the committee or whether you're a coach of a different team, right? So not good for scouting, I guess, but when you're looking at all these mid-majors and how they use their platforms, not every school has the deal with ESPN Plus, right? So you have to find different ways to get your content out there. And I think it is a creative way. The Big East does it with the digital network that they have too. So it goes both ways of putting your athletes on the map. And that's one way to do it because, like you said, Ravi, I would love to see more mid-major schools get into the tournament because it's just going to make it more fun.
Yeah, that's the part about the tournament everybody loves, right? I don't care about seeing a 18 or 19 win major conference team see if they can make it to the Sweet 16. I don't care about that at all. They're probably losing anyway. They've shown all year they weren't good enough to compete at that level or couldn't consistently get themselves to compete at that level. Like, I want to see the teams that haven't had the opportunity yet. I want to give them the chance to see, hey, like, yeah, I can compete at this level. I just didn't have a chance to do that during the regular season. And that's the part, like I said, if I had one bugaboo about the NCAA tournament, get me on the phone to whoever's leading that committee this year. We'll see if we can figure it out. Certainly didn't mean to talk about 20 minutes of Summit League basketball there, but here we are. We will get to
Thank you, guys.
we will get to a bunch of other stuff, including Fred Hoiberg later on in the show. We're going to talk, as I mentioned earlier, to Isaac Trotter. He is the national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports. We'll get into lots of media day stuff from the Big Ten. We've got some Rule audio. I think he actually said some interesting things.
Yeah.
I think he maybe told us that there's a new starting quarterback without really saying there's a new starting quarterback officially. That was interesting. Some stuff about Marcus Washington as well, which is not good news on the knee. But we will get to a bunch of that Rule audio, at least discussing it coming up next. Probably no surprise, but Dylan Brooks from the NBA in preseason has already pissed me off. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit later as well. And I've got a little game. I've got a little would you rather game for Anna later.
Okay.
With specifically, because we're kind of getting into that season, kind of in our holiday gauntlet season. We go Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all in a couple months here. So, I think we're gonna do a little holiday food would you rather. Some people know I've got some reasonably spicy takes about Thanksgiving food, but I'm not going to try and taint you with my views here. We'll let you answer those coming up later. So that's pickle. Thank you, Shane. That's what's coming up on the show today. Reminder, you can listen to us on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. Of course, we're on YouTube, Twitter. We appreciate all of our commenters. Thomas in the stream already, and Les on Twitter talking to us from Mexico. Listen, I'm going to be honest. I really like Hurrdat Sports. I like our programming. If I'm in Mexico, I'm not listening to talk radio. I'm sorry. Like, that's just not on the table. But we appreciate the loyalty of our guy Les. He comes out to some of the breakfast sometimes, and good dude there. We appreciate him listening in. Where's the last place you went on vacation?
This last weekend in Arizona.
Arizona. What's in Arizona?
Just friends.
Okay.
I tried to hike Camelback Mountain.
Okay.
Didn't go well.
Oh, what
so
happened?
I went I think we went at like 9 or 10, and it was 100 degrees.
At 9 in the morning?
Yeah.
In October?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
In Scottsdale. And there was a park ranger at the bottom of the mountain and was warning us that someone had died yesterday.
Cool.
Like the day before we had went. I was like,
just hiking?
Yeah, I think from dehydration they had to do like a emergency lift off of the mountain for this person. And she was warning everyone, like, make sure you have enough water. And I had just gotten off my flight, honestly. So I was already dehydrated and not great. And I was like, I don't know. So we went up halfway, and then I turned around. I was like, I can't do this.
That's a good call.
Yeah.
That's a good call.
Probably.
You don't want to die on a mountain. Nobody wants that. It is, I got to say, hiking is not for me. That is
it's not even a hike. Like, you have to climb.
Yeah, it's like an actual mountain.
It's not a nice hike. You're on your hands and knees, like going up rocks.
Yeah, hiking in Arizona is just called mountain climbing. Yeah. Like, it's not in Omaha here where
I'm
you're
not
just
doing
like
that again.
Chilling out through the Luss Hills and Council Bluffs or anything like that. Well, we're glad Anna made it back safe and sound and in one piece. We've got more of Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
And then we have a bunch of guys that are going out Thursday and Friday. I'll be out Thursday and Friday. So we'll hit a lot of guys Thursday and Friday evaluation period wise. See some guys play on Friday. And then, we came out today and just played football. I thought it was really important that we got ourselves back in the groove of competition. Tomorrow we'll continue to work on some things. We're doing a ton of self-scout, a ton of improvement work, a ton of looking at, some areas that we think we need to improve upon, some third down stuff, some red zone stuff. We'll implement some of that. Thursday will be a lot of Northwestern stuff to get a jump on them. They have a bye week too, so they know who we are. We know who they are. So, but to me right now, the goal is for us to go 1-0 this week, just in terms of improving ourselves and getting the young guys some good work.
You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla. Anna Bellinghausen here with me as well. So, Anna, I have to admit here, I have a little bit of the yips with your name.
Okay.
A little bit. Okay.
Yep.
I had never mispronounced it before or said it wrong in my life. Not that I've had to say it a lot prior to us hosting shows together. And then I asked you before the show last week to make sure I said it right.
Uh-huh.
And I left off the last syllable of your name,
once,
which I had never done before. And now it is in my head so deeply that every time I say it, I'm like, wait, is it house or housen? Is it? And I swear to God, it's a mental battle every time I say it. So if I make a mistake, first of all, I apologize. Secondly, I'm doing my best. contest here. It is. I had a friend who could not distinguish between pineapples and coconuts. She knew they were different fruits, but she would see one and she would get so in her head about which one was which. And they don't even look the same, right? There's very little similar about them. That's how I am with your name right now, is I am just so deep in my head about it.
You can just call me Anna B.
Anna B. I might do that. I might have to do that.
That's what everyone calls me.
You can follow her at Annabella Media on Twitter. You can follow me at Ravi Lulla. But I just wanted to acknowledge that, get that out of the way. So if I do like pull a Chuck Knobloch and throw your name into the stands, it is not intentional or anything reflection of you, just my own neuroses, I think. So anyway, we heard Matt Rule there on the audio that Shane played as we came out of the break. And, he said some things yesterday that I actually think he told us some things.
For sure.
Which you don't always get out of coaches, especially in that situation. First and foremost, obviously, tough news on Marcus Washington. That is a pretty depleted group already, to say the least.
Yeah.
And he was he was playing as well as anybody in that group. I mean, Billy Kemp has done well, but it seemed like Marcus Washington had sort of developed a little bit of chemistry with
100%.
with Heinrich Harburg. And so that's a big loss, obviously. We've been clamoring to see the freshman wide receivers. Well, we don't really have a choice now. This might be one of those be careful what you wish for situations. So really tough for Marcus Washington, who I think is in his 6th year already. So he's
been around.
Likely not coming back. I don't think did he miss a game early in the season with the hamstring?
He might have.
So he maybe still has only played 4 games.
So there might be a medical redshirt.
Yeah, but does he want to go back to college for a 7th year? Like, that's the other question. So best wishes to Marcus Washington on all of that. But the other thing that Coach Rule said that I think maybe slid under the radar, I didn't really see anybody else talking about this, but he goes, Rule said, Jeff's out there now. He's back healthy now. And then he said, hey, Heinrich started the last several games, so he's going to be the starter, but there's competition, whatever. I think he low-key, without us even asking, because we had been asking a few, I say we as in people that go to the press conference. I don't typically.
All right. What do you guys got?
And we, people have asked, hey, like, has Heinrich replaced Jeff as the starter? Is he ahead of him? Whatever. And Rules kind of danced around that question quite a bit. And then he kind of just came out and said it without anybody asking. Is that how you took those comments as well?
I would say so. Yeah. I was kind of like, if there was a game today, Heinrich would start.
Yeah.
That was kind of how he danced around that question, right? Whether or not Sims is going to be 1000% healthy for this next game here. But I think he gave a kind of ambiguous answer of, Heinrich is starting. And I also like the fact that he did mention, hey, I don't name a starter because I want there to be competition. Because honestly, you don't want those guys to get comfortable.
No.
You don't want them to get comfortable in their position and think that, oh, I won the starting job, right? Because you want to continue that internal competition just for the pure fact that there is no solid QB1, right?
Yeah.
You have guys that are talented, but you don't know what they can necessarily produce in different situations. So I think I liked how he answered the question, whether or not there was even a question posed. It was kind of an interesting way, and I'm surprised again that he did kind of come out and
really
say
gave us that much,
right? That gave media that much, but again, I still think Heinrich's the guy. From at least what his statement was, at least it seems that way.
Yeah, it's the way I took it was, especially because on the front end he mentioned that Jeff is healthy now, and really didn't couch it. Every time he had talked about Jeff's status before, he'd kind of hedged it a little bit. It's like, well, he's not 100%, but he's out there, and he just said he's back healthy now. So I took that for what he said it as. And then I thought it was really interesting the way he also kind of told us, like, hey, if Chuba hadn't gotten banged up that week that he probably would have gotten the snaps over Harburg.
Yeah, that was super interesting to me just to hear in general that Chubba would have been QB1 over Heinrich had he been healthy. I never would have thought he would have expressed that.
Yeah, I thought
that was interesting.
Yeah, I did too. And he talked about how, hey, he said before, I think we've got 3 quarterbacks that can help us win. But that's really the first time that he said, he had said that Harburg had been 2 or 3, depending on what part of the year you were in. And then Chubba got a little banged up. So, I mean, you maybe could have surmised that from what he had said before. But he just really came out and said, yeah, I think Chubba would have started or would have gotten those snaps over Harburg.
But maybe that was kind of a backwards compliment to Heinrich, and hey, we didn't think that you were going to be that successful, but you proved us wrong, right? And you proved that you are maybe the best quarterback out of that group.
Maybe a little bit of motivation for Chubba as well to say, like, hey, this really, you could still.
He was low-key calling people out.
He was like, hey, you could still be this guy. You were ahead of Heinrich. And, there is a part of me that kind of does want to see Chubba Purdy at some point.
I would love to.
Because I mean, I've never been a huge fan, just full disclosure. I saw him at Florida State, wasn't super impressed. Obviously, we saw him a little bit last year, and in the spring game, wasn't super impressed. Not that I was impressed with Harburg in the spring game either, to be fair. But, I think he probably has a skill set that fits the offense that Marcus Satterfield wants to run a little bit better. And I think he's probably the most natural passer of that group out of Sims and Harburg and Purdy. And so I wonder if with the strides we've seen Harburg make, like, has Purdy made similar strides? Because if he has, that might be a pretty good quarterback in that room.
That's what I'm wondering too, just at practice. I mean, you're going up against a good defense while they might not create too many turnovers in practice. And I've seen that brought up too of, hey, if this defense had been creating turnovers in practice, would Jeff Sims have been QB1 still?
Right.
And that's an interesting point too. But I think that Chubba must be, right? Because if it's a QB competition every week, the guy that no one's been talking about is Chubba Purdy.
Absolutely.
And why wouldn't he want to be that starting quarterback and kind of prove people wrong too? I'm sure he has a major chip on his shoulder just from being injured and now being healthy and seeing that, hey, that's my spot, right? Like, I'm sure in his mind that he's saying, hey, that's rightfully mine to go get.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and he's I think people kind of forget he was a pretty highly touted guy coming out of high school. He was a 4-star, obviously went to Florida State. You see where Florida State is now. And you look at him and you go, he's kind of the forgotten man at this point. He's sort of in a position that Heinrich Harburg was in last year, where people just forget about him, haven't really talked about him. And, I'm not totally convinced if he's healthy that he might not even still be the best person for this job, not to create unnecessary quarterback controversy. But I do think, there's a fine line between quarterback controversy and quarterback competition, right? Quarterback competition is really good. Quarterback controversy is probably more of a media thing than a locker room thing, although I think it can certainly spread there too. If there's, I think it's more of a
they see it
personality and leadership thing, right? I think it really only becomes a controversy in the locker room if the majority of the team thinks somebody who isn't playing gives them a better chance to win.
Sure.
I do want to touch on that topic you brought up though, because Ryan on Twitter asked a really interesting question about evaluating the quarterbacks in camp compared to what the defense has been doing this year in the season. And I want to touch on that next. We'll do that here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Yeah, I mean, I think Heinrich's prepared at a high level, got himself ready to play. I think that room has that culture. I'll be honest with you. If Chubba not gotten hurt that day, I'm not so sure Chubba wouldn't have gone out there first. And I think Chubba would have done the same thing. And that's not a knock on Heinrich. I just think that room is, Jeff's out there. He's back healthy now. Jeff's out there. He's competing like crazy. We have 3 quarterbacks that I believe we can win with. And I only say that because I said that. I think Steve asked me that before the first game. I said, I think we have 3 quarterbacks we can win with. Each has their own strengths, and you have to kind of tailor what we're doing to each guy. But, I think Heinrich was ready for his moment. He's capitalized on it. He has a long way to go. He's leaving a lot of things out there. He's learning how to, the wear and tear of running him as many times as we're doing, that can have an effect on you. And he's gaining that. He's gaining that knowledge of, hey, here's how I can best take care of myself and prepare each week. And then I think Marcus is doing a good job of finding the throws that he feels comfortable with, right? Basically, most teams now they're rushing 3 and they're playing man and they're dropping guys off and they're trying to make sure he doesn't leave the pocket and trying to not chip balls down because of his release. And so our defense is starting trying to knock the ball down. So he's having to work through that. But takes great ownership. I have a lot of respect for Heinrich. He had a ball batted down today and he was like, that's on me. Like he gets angry at himself. So I think he'll turn himself into a really good player.
Wrapping up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. That's Anna Bellinghausen. Nailed it. We are live on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, Twitter, YouTube, all the places you get the podcast. You can find us as well. That was that Matt Rule clip that we had talked about in the previous in the previous segment about kind of the quarterback competition in that room. And, I've always been one to believe that competition brings out the best in everyone. And if there's certain guys that don't like competition, then maybe those aren't the guys that are going to do much winning for you, And I get really, I'm going to die on this hill. I get really frustrated when that same philosophy isn't taken in recruiting as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see, especially at the quarterback position, you see so many schools only take one guy per class. And I don't know how they expect to have competition in the room if you're only taking one guy per class, right?
Are you adding Danny Kaelin and Anthony Rizak?
I would like to. I would like them to add Anthony Rizak and along with Danny Kaelin, because they're different guys, right? They're different guys in their skill sets. They're different guys in their mentality and their mindsets. And listen, I don't know if either of them are going to be successful at the next level, but I think when you have a variety of skill sets and personalities in a room, you're most likely to get the best out of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So you're most likely to get the best version for you on the football field, regardless of who that is, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, Danny Kaelin has a skill set that not just Nebraska, but a lot of schools found attractive. Obviously, Anthony Rizak has not had the same recruiting hype and success that Danny Kaelin had, but I still think he has things that he brings to the table that could be really valuable to a Power 5 quarterback room. And a lot of those things differ from what Kaelin brings to the table. So bring those guys together and see which one rises to the top. That's all I'm looking for, whether it's with the recruiting class or the current group. So I appreciate the mindset that Coach Rule kind of played out there with the quarterback competition, because I genuinely do believe he'll put the guy out there that he thinks he gives them the best chance to win. And at least for today, I guess that's Heinrich Harburg. We'll see what tomorrow brings.
You don't know, but I do think it is a good sign to hear Coach say, "Hey, we have 3 quarterbacks that we can win with." I mean, man, that's
I think
a lot
he
of competition.
means it.
I think so too. I don't think he would say it if he really didn't mean it or truly believe that. And again, back to his comment that Chubba might have been out there.
Yeah, was ahead of Heinrich.
Yeah, and doing the same thing. I thought that was interesting too. Whether how literally he meant that statement, we don't know. Maybe he was doing hypotheticals of, if it was Heinrich that was hurt, it would have been Chubba. I mean, you just can't take everything too literally sometimes in those press conferences. Obviously, he's saying a lot of things, but
yeah, I mean, I think so.
Thank you, Shane.
Well, and I think he's talking to Chubba there too.
Yeah.
I think he's reminding him like, hey, you're still part of this.
It could have been you kind of thing.
It could have been you. It could still be you.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like going into recruiting, that is huge because Rule's obviously open to having more than one quarterback and putting stock in more than one guy. So, I mean, imagine being let's say an Anthony Rizak and saying, hey, maybe Coach Rule would be willing to have 2 QBs from Nebraska in that room competing against one another.
Absolutely.
Because you can earn your spot every week.
And they'll give you a fair shake, right?
You'll get a fair shake, and maybe you don't want to start a different quarterback every week. I don't think any offensive coordinator or play caller would enjoy that, but I think it's a fair shot and it's a fair opportunity. And in this day and age of the transfer portal and the injuries, crazy injury bug that even Nebraska has seen, you just never know.
Yeah.
And I think if you're passionate about being at Nebraska or you're passionate about staying in your state and playing, I think there's always opportunity for more than one quarterback in a class. And again, to your point, Ravi, I think competition does breed the best version of yourself, because if you're not internally competing and externally competing, then who are you trying to improve, right? Who are you doing this for, right? If it's not for yourself, then at least it's against another person that could have your job.
Well, and I'm convinced that one of the problems in Nebraska's quarterback room for the last several years, I mean, you could probably go back a decade and a half, honestly, is that there hasn't been consistent competition in that room. There's been one clear guy and a huge drop off to the next person. Right. And we've sort of seen some other guys, whether it was Luke McCaffrey when Adrian Martinez got hurt, or, you want to go all the way back to like Tommy Armstrong and Ron Kellogg. Like you would see
Tanner Lee.
Yeah, you see Tanner Lee, and then you've got, Logan Smothers plays a little bit here and there. And so you've got these little glimpses, but they were pretty clear that the second guy was not in the neighborhood of the first guy for the most part. And when you got a glimpse of Heinrich Harburg, you're like, oh, that's not. I don't know that there's a visible drop off between him and Jeff Sims. You can make an argument that there's things Harburg does better than Sims, and I think I would make that argument. But I think that's one of the things that has plagued Nebraska football is not having competition at their quarterback on their quarterback depth chart. And so I think that's something you have to that's not going to happen on accident, right? You have to actively go out and try and create competition in that room by the way you recruit, whether it's in the transfer portal, whether it's in the high school ranks, whatever it is. Yeah. If it's not Anthony Rizak, fine, right? Like, I think he's going to get his offer from somewhere, whether it's Nebraska or whoever else. Like,
for sure,
that's fine. But I do think you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket for a quarterback per class. I think you should continually try and get competition in that room. And if guys don't want to deal with that competition, they're probably not the right guy.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know any high-level athlete worth their salt that is afraid of competition or that isn't confident that he'll win the competition. And with the transfer portal the way it is now, it is a lower stakes gamble than it's ever been because you don't have to waste a year if you lose that competition. You just move on.
Right.
It's not like you have to sit out a year and waste a red shirt or anything like that. So I would love to – I like that there's competition in the room today. I would love to see competition in the room moving forward as they recruit. But I do want to get to the question that Ryan asked on Twitter that you kind of alluded to last segment of how much do you think the defense's performance in practice impacted the way the quarterbacks were evaluated? Because this has been a very good defense so far this year, but not taking the ball over a ton or turning the ball over a ton from the opponents. Do you think that maybe gave the coaching staff a false sense of what Jeff Sims was and how much he had maybe improved in taking care of the football?
I think so. I think there's definitely merit there in the fact that the defense probably and wasn't creating many turnovers during practice because you don't get a true evaluation of how he takes care of the ball. And obviously that's been very important and been the main factor in a lot of these losses. But I think it's tough to say because if you're day in and day out with the defense, I still think you're getting to see a true version of that quarterback, obviously against that same defense. So you're getting the same tests every single day. And maybe Jeff Sims just really figured out that Nebraska defense and use his athletic ability to prove that every day. But I think there is some merit to that in how the decision was made at quarterback. But I mean, honestly, if you're thinking back to the very first days after Matt Rule was hired and then bringing in Jeff Sims as a transfer, honestly, there was never a doubt in my mind that he was going to be QB1.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Like, that's totally fair as well.
Not thinking about the mindset of not only fans, but media members. And I think the coaching staff themselves, I can't speak on their behalf, obviously, but Matt Rule went out and got Jeff Sims to be quarterback number one. And I think that.
And he let Casey Thompson go.
Right.
Yeah.
And from there on, it's confirmation bias, right?
Right.
You're seeing what you want to see in practice, and you went out there, you put yourself on the line to get this quarterback and put your trust in him. And there was plenty of other options, right, in the portal that he could have gotten, could have went, but he saw something in Jeff Sims that other people didn't see and that he felt would be the right fit at Nebraska. I still think he would have started whoever was going to give them the best chance to win week one. But I think there was a lot of weight put on Jeff Sims coming into the program. And at least for me, it was more so, hey, who did Matt Rule go out and recruit to bring in as QB1? Whatever Nebraska had in that quarterback room wasn't good enough. Was the vibe I felt.
Well, and you've got, obviously you see it in the NFL when somebody drafts a quarterback. You see it in college when somebody recruits a quarterback. There's an obvious bias towards the guy that you picked, right?
100%.
And whether that's conscious, subconscious, whatever, it's just a thing that happens, and it's it's natural. I will give him credit for reevaluating so quickly, but I also think it's interesting. I wonder if Jeff Sims had a better idea of how to handle that defense because he had played Tony White at Syracuse with Georgia Tech. Like I just am curious how much that factored into the way they thought about Jeff Sims going into the season. Coming up next, we've got Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. We will continue our chat with Husker football here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Here is Husker 24/7 senior writer, Brian Christopherson.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit of a circus act.
Brian Christopherson.
Well, I mean, that's pretty interesting.
Brian Christopherson.
I kind of enjoy that.
Here is Brian Christopherson.
I did the same thing in Illinois last year. It was a close game. The ball was ripped out. To me, it's all technical. It's about covering the tip of the ball and keeping the ball high and tight. If you watch Heinrich run with the football, Coach Osborne came in yesterday. We watched some film with us, and he just talked about how beautifully Heinrich carries the football. He carries exactly like we ask him to do. You watch Tommy Hill. He had that fumble again on the kickoff return, and Tommy Hill picks the ball off the other night, and there's a picture of him, we're going 5 points of ball security. It's a commitment to that. And so Anthony's been running with the ball one way his whole life, not protecting the front tip of the ball. And again, the ball getting out here. It's Division I football. You're not going to have a lot of runs where you start right and work back left. It just doesn't happen, especially in 4 minutes. So we've just got to continue to coach him.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Anna Bellinghausen with me as well this morning. Joining us now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline is our friend Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing pretty good, guys. I'm up in chilly Minnesota.
I'll say I heard you're on your way to a Twins game.
Yeah, we're already it's my brother, my dad, and I up here in Minneapolis for Game 4, Twins Astros, after the Astros kicked our tail. I always say "our" with the Twins, like I, am the pitching coach. But yeah, we're going to a game at 6:00 tonight, and my dad wants to go golfing, and it's 45 degrees, so I'm really fired up about that as we get ready to do that.
Ooh, bundle up, my guy. How you feeling about the Twins going into Game 4?
Not too confident,
Okay.
I'll say. But I've never been to a Major League playoff game, actually. So I'm checking that off the list, and I'm hoping we got a tight affair going into the 9th inning, and it gives me something memorable for our trip.
Well, I think everybody outside of probably the greater Houston area is rooting for your Twins over the Astros. So good luck to you tonight. We hope you have a memorable experience. Let's get a little Carlos Correa walk-off for you. Might as well, right?
Yeah, let's do that. So that would be all right. I didn't bring a trash can or anything. I think those jokes probably played themselves out, but we'll see. I think it'll be a rowdy crowd tonight. It was supposed to be a 1 p.m. first pitch, but it got moved back to 6 because the Rangers swept the Orioles. So the boys are playing late. It's going to be a little colder, but I've got my layers and I'll be ready for it.
Well, and the colder it gets, the more you got to pregame a little bit to keep yourself warm, right?
Yeah, there could be some of that going on. So
it's called a booze blanket.
See how it goes.
Booze blanket there. I was talking about hot chocolate. I don't know what you're talking about, Anna.
Yeah, that's what I meant too. Man, Anna.
You could tell she was in college very recently with that. No, BC, I thought it was interesting. We were talking a little bit about Coach Rule's comments yesterday, and it seems like, kind of without coming out and saying it, he sort of told us, hey, yeah, Heinrich Haarberg has replaced Jeff Sims as the starter. Is that how you took those comments, or am I kind of reading too much into it?
No, I mean, doing our best Columbo detective work, I would say. That's an outdated reference as well, but I would say that that's how it feels to me. At least for now, until Heinrich, unless he gives him a reason to make a move, I sort of don't know why you mess with it. I have said publicly, and I'll keep saying it, I don't think anybody has just put a stamp down on the paper like this is the way it has to be. This is the number one QB. I don't feel that way about the position at this point. So that's sort of my stance on it. Like, they could trot Jeff Sims out for the first snap against Northwestern after the bye, and I'd be like, okay, let's see what happens. Because I think Heinrich is growing on the job, and you're seeing it. You're seeing the ups and downs that go with that. Like, he has some plays where it's really exciting, especially when he's out running and and Illinois defensive back is in his way, and you feel bad for the guy. You're like, just make a business decision and get out of there because he's going to clock you, which he did. But then there's moments, when he's throwing the ball, when you see that the room still to grow in that area where the passes are sailing a bit. Not that can't happen to anybody, but that's the book on Heinrich going in, right? He's a very good runner. We're seeing him develop as a passer. I thought the Michigan game, honestly, as bad as it was for the team, was one of his better throwing performances. When he started, he was 12 of 17 in the first 3 quarters or whatever, and I was like, okay, I see some things against a top level defense there that can work going forward. I didn't think last Friday was as good in that department for him, but the bottom line is it's easy to forget through all the bumbles and fumbles of the second half that Heinrich, he made some plays in the second quarter that were key, where he'd make that fourth down throw to Alex Bullock and the 3rd and 10 to Ty Hunt. So he has done some positives. He's 3-1 as a starter. Do I think Jeff Sims might have been 3-1 as a starter against the same competition? Yes, I do, because I think the defense has been the lion for this team, and no matter who the quarterback is. That said, he's protected the ball better. And so until that changes, I think probably he's the best option for this team at the moment.
Brian, I want to switch gears just a little bit. So Marcus Washington with the ACL tear, bad news, obviously, for the Huskers, and wish him the best. But I just want your thoughts on the depleted wide receiver room. And obviously that goes down just a little bit more with Marcus heading out for the season. And when you look at the play calling that Satterfield has run, and then, you saw Matt Rule kind of chime in a little bit there, had to take a timeout at one point. How does that change the play calling? Does it get more conservative? Are you able to take more risk with those young wide receivers?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't mind, Anna, if they, you've got Malachi and a guy like Jalen Lloyd, who's got obviously that great track speed. I wouldn't mind if they let them loose on a few deep shots, and I'm not saying they go crazy with it, but the one or two, in the next game, just say it's there. Like, put it on film. Like, these guys can do this. These young players have that speed component to their game. We're going to see if they can run by somebody. So I'm up for opening it up in that way, because I think that's kind of a low risk play, right, for everybody. If you do that once in a while, I mean, say the ball gets picked. It did against Illinois. It got picked off. It was like 35, 40 yards down the field. So you're like, okay, it's basically a net punt there. So I'm okay with taking some shots with those guys, because that seems like stuff, first off, that, they could do pretty well. Just to do what your God-given traits allow you to do, and just run past people, with your speed. So I'm for that. I do think there's probably some things they're still catching up on that maybe they have to think twice about. Can we use this with these certain guys? I don't know how far along they are on everything. The guy I'm really interested in is seeing if his snaps hike up a bunch is Jaden Doss, because prior to the season starting, like 2 weeks before, he was, I think, going to be the first freshman in the game. And then he broke his arm, and so that set him back. And he only played 5 or 6 snaps because, his position was taken on Friday. But I wonder if he's a player that maybe now, with a little extra time, you can find some specific things for a jack of all trades type guy, where you can use him in creative ways. He was, as a recruit, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, he was sometimes used as like the Debo Samuel type guy. That is, you could put him at a running back, you could send him on a reverse, put him all over the field. He can do those sort of things. So I'm curious if they might find some things for him. But obviously all eyes on Malachi. Played 57 snaps, and he got open too. At times there were some balls that could have been there that weren't. And he got his first catch out of the way. So, that has to feel good for him to have that behind him. And now let's see if he can use that as a launching pad.
BC, are you surprised, impressed? I mean, you can maybe choose the adjective, but considering all of the depletion of the wide receiver room, the running back room, obviously the original starting quarterback, are you surprised that they are able to do anything on offense at all? Because if you had told me those things going into the season, I'd be like, oh, they haven't scored yet this year.
Well, yeah, I totally get that question. I guess you got to do something. You got to hand it off or have something in your scheme. But yeah, it's been about the worst case scenario you could imagine. I mean, they've stayed relatively healthy on the offensive line, knock on wood, but everywhere else, I mean, you go through it, think about Xavier Betts leaving in the summer, the Isaiah Garcia Castaneda injury, which sometimes can pass through your mind, but that happened, right away. And now this one to Marcus. So there's 3 guys you would have thought, if you had said back in, June, name like the top 5 wide receivers. Well, there's 3 of them gone.
Right.
Okay, name the top running backs. You would have said Gabe Irvin, Ramir Johnson. Some would have mentioned Anthony, but I think it was trending toward those guys at the top and Anthony third.
Mm-hmm.
So your top 2 running backs gone. I don't think Arik Gilbert was going to play, and obviously he's had difficulties off the field. But there's another guy that some people at one point thought could be a part of things, not involved. So, and then the QB situation. So that it's pretty amazing when you go through it all, as far as not just the number of guys who have been lost, but it's like every time you look down on the field, it's like, oh, that's a really significant guy. And I don't mean that to, you always say it when any guy's injured, but
Mm-hmm.
when you see Marcus Washington down on the field as a senior, and he knows what he's doing, that's a guy that can win on a 3rd and 8 for you. He's proven that it can be done. That's painful, and it's just like, okay, it's just another thing you have to work around. So all this to say, I'm not saying coaches aren't, that they're above criticism or anything like that. I'm just saying in Marcus Satterfield's first year as the offensive coordinator, when you're going to have that conversation about how everything looks over there, that this has to be in the top 3 sentences. Okay, what about all the injuries too? And what they're maybe having to do that they would rather, they'd rather be doing something else in certain cases, perhaps. So you got to factor that in, at least when we talk about this.
BC, I'm glad you brought up Marcus Satterfield here, because I was thinking about not only the job he's done at Nebraska, but the first year he was at South Carolina, I believe that was the year that they had to pull a grad assistant out of the coaching staff to finish the year, or to start the year, I think, at quarterback because of all the injuries there. I mean, he might be kind of uniquely qualified to be in the position he's in right now, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I think he mentioned that once. He's sort of been through it all with injuries and stuff like that. And the one thing I'll say about him is I haven't really heard him lead with that in any talks with the media, like, yeah, but what about if, we had Ramir, we'd be doing this and all that. You can't look at it that way. You got to look at the guys in your room who are up, and it's the old Hoosiers line, my team's on the floor, these are my guys. We're going to go out there with what we have. We're going to find ways to best accentuate what they can do. And, can it be, here's the big question of the second half of the season. Can they make it a blessing in disguise at certain spots, like wide receiver?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't an ideal spot, but it is what it is. And now you've got games against teams. You can win these games, and you've got young players with talent enough to make a play against a Northwestern or a Purdue. It's within them to do that. You've got to make them believe they can do that. And if they can, we could look back at, where if Nebraska is getting ready for a bowl game and they get to 6 wins and these young guys have contributed to that, and say, okay, they've now got some stepping stones that they've taken toward next year. We're going to feel a little bit better about this group than we did. So Matt Rule has always been bullish on his receivers in particular and what they're going to be. And now I think we're just to that moment where 1 or 2 of them at least kind of need to start, they need to be it a little bit here in the next 6 weeks at times. It's not going to be all the time, but at times it has to pop up and you're like, oh, that's going to be nice.
Brian, do you think it's okay if Nebraska doesn't find their quote-unquote offensive identity this season, given all the circumstances?
That's a good question. I think what they would say is that they know what they want to be. And Rule had a pretty good quote about this where just because you're not executing it necessarily, or it's not at the highest level, and I'm paraphrasing, but that doesn't mean you don't know what you want to be. There are I've watched Husker teams where you feel like there's no template in place here, right? I mean, I don't know what exactly their staples are or what they want to be a year or 2 down the road. When I watch this offense, I don't think it's easy on the eyes, but I do think I know what they're going toward. Like, I can see the type of team they want to be. Now, the component, though, that I'd love to see pop up, and this is where those young receivers come into play, is before the season, Rule would talk about being a grounded, pounded team, but also, taking those long shots and having that in your arsenal. And I think it was last week on this very show where I was thinking about it. I mean, have we seen that pass completion where a guy catches it, where the ball travels in the air like 35, 40 yards, you know what I mean? And it's caught, and it's that type of play. I'm not looking for that all the time. I'm looking for one or two of those that pop into a game that change the direction, and it's just a huge play that kind of dings the other side. So that's the part with the, kind of grind it out, body blows organization that Rule wants with the run game that I'd love to see surface a little bit here in the second half of the season. And then if you see that a bit, I think you can kind of piece together, this is what they want it to look like just at a higher level as they go forward.
So the season might be, hey, let's figure out what will work this game for this team with what they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to do that, with any team, really. What does it take to get the job done, to get a win on that given
Might
week?
not be pretty.
Not that you're, yeah, and that's why I think you've heard Rule say things like, publicly, no less, like, defense, I want you to know this is a defensive-oriented football team. We don't always hear head coaches say that, right? Where they just put one phase of the game out there sort of in front, like you're the heart of this thing. We're playing around you. And so, I mean, you hear a quote like that, you do realize, with the offense, it's not that they don't want to score every possession, but there's also an understanding, play within the parts of your team and what we have at this moment. And that, that includes if it's third down and 6 yards at your own 45-yard line and the play's not there, for goodness sake, just throw that ball away, do what you got to do. We're going to trust the defense to make them go 85, 90 yards. And especially in these next few weeks, that's going to be critical, because I really do believe if the offense can play solid, and you said, or yesterday Rule was like, what we got to just fix up, we got to clean some things up, got to take these turnovers out of the equation. If they can do that against Northwestern Purdue, they've got a good enough defense to be 5-3 at the end of this, at the end of October. So, you are playing around what you have a little bit. I think that's always kind of the way it is. But along with that, hopefully a young guy or two does something here in October and November that kind of makes you sit up and you're like, okay, there it is. I mean, that's what it can look like as we go forward, and they get another off season of work behind the scenes here.
BC, I wanted to ask you about something that Rule said after the Illinois game, and we just hadn't had a chance to really talk to you about it yet. With the procedural penalties and kind of the way that Rule addressed those with the kind of mimicking of the snap of the defense and things like that, I guess, how did you process that between understanding what he was talking about and trying to defend his guys versus also, I was kind of in the mindset of, hey, like at some point you just have to stop jumping off or jumping false starts or whatever.
Yeah.
I guess, how did you process that sort of dynamic there of trying to protect his guys, but also, kind of trying to take accountability?
Right. I think both can be okay. Like, publicly, you're standing up for your guys, and also alerting a fan base where that's going to be the talking point all week of it. This was part of that. He did say within there's a time where maybe it's happened 2 or 3 times where you got to say, hey, this is what they're doing on 3rd and 3 or whatever, before the snap. You stop jumping. It's going to keep happening, and just you got to stand tall there. So I understood what he was doing, but I agree with you, Ravi. It's one of those deals behind the scenes where you got to be accountable to it, and you got to know that teams are going to keep messing with you if they can get away with it. If there is something going on there, they're going to try to do whatever it takes to make you jump again. And so you've got to get your guys disciplined to, even if you feel like someone is sort of outside the boundaries of etiquette for the game or whatever, it's still, if it's happening, respond to it in the way that it's not always 3rd and 15. So either way, it goes down in the stat sheet as it did, and it was was a painful second half. So you got to learn a lot of lessons from that, because that was a game where the defense balled out and they bailed out their offense, because that was, I mean, I was sitting there with 5 minutes left thinking this game should have been over 3 times by now. And we're still waiting to see if Nebraska can make one final stand to sort of put it away. So as good as it was to go on the road and win a game some people didn't expect you to win, or you were a slight underdog, you got to take all those things and make them growing points here as you go into the second half of the season, because that won't be enough in some other games.
Was there any part of you that was, I guess, happy to see, I don't know if happy is the right word, but sort of, yeah, we'll just stick with happy, to see Nebraska sort of shoot itself in the foot several times and still come out with a win? Because there was a part of me that was excited by that they didn't like self-destruct totally.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing I always go back to is what was everybody saying during the week, and I don't think we then can change where we set the hurdle for the team. And before the week going into the game, like I said, they were slight underdog, I think, by Vegas standards. And, you know, a lot of people thought this will be a kind of a pick 'em game. Some were picking Nebraska. I picked Illinois because I wanted to see Nebraska prove they could win a game like that on the road, even though Illinois is not a great football team. So the fact that they, you know, did biff it up quite a bit and they still won 20-7, and you could look at it and say, man, they should have won that game like 34-7 or something like that. There is a positive light you could cast on that, where that they showed the potential of how that game could have gone. And also, I think the thing that encourages you is, I think we were wondering after Michigan, okay, is this defense for real against most of the teams they're going to play, or was Michigan cluing us into something? It turns out, well, I don't want to say it's definitive yet, but I think this defense is really solid and equipped for most of the competition they're going to see when it's not Michigan. And so that was really encouraging to me to see how they bounced back. And, Tony White and that crew, the way they've rotated guys and the level they've played in the first year, I would say they're ahead of schedule. I mean, I just would. For the first season, I'm really impressed by what they've done on that side of the ball.
Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. B, good luck tonight with your Twins. And I think I speak for everyone when I say take down the Astros for us, all right?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Always enjoy talking to you.
All right, great stuff. We appreciate it, B. That is our friend Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. Coming up next, we've got Andy Kendeigh from KETV right here in Omaha, and we'll have more of Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla. Anna Bellinghausen here with me on a Wednesday, and we are brought to you by Warhorse Sportsbook, the best place in Nebraska to place your sports bets. You've got to be in person at the Warhorse Sportsbook in order to place those bets, but they have plenty of kiosks and sportsbook tellers to take your wagers. Find out more. You can go to warhorsecasino.com/sportsbook or download the Warhorse Casino app. Now, joining us on that Warhorse Sportsbook hotline is Andy Kendeigh from KETV. Andy, how are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm just hoping I get some better odds since I'm brought to you by Warhorse. I've never been. I have not been there yet. Maybe this is the weekend, but this would be a good weekend to go. No Husker games, so. I
was going to say, you got the bye week. You've got some time to explore. You know, some people go to the apple orchard. They go to the pumpkin patch. Andy Kendeigh's going to the casino. I like it.
That's right. Darn straight. First of all, I reintroduced myself to my children, and then I said, my name is Dad. I've been around for a while, and you got this weekend, and then I'm gone for another 6 weeks. So see you Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and then you don't have to worry about it. It's just basketball season for another 6 months. You're fine. It's all right. You can get to know your children in April through July. It's all right. So on this bye week, obviously don't have Nebraska football, but you've got some, probably the most intriguing matchup in high school football all season with Westside and Millard South. Is it safe to assume that's where you'll be on Friday?
Yeah, that's our game of the week, no question. And it's really because the schedule's stacked because Bennington plays Elkhorn North in a 1-2 matchup there in Class B, and there's a host of other games that are just like in some weeks, if it was weeks 5, 6, 7, those would be the main games. But for whatever reason, week 8 is loaded, and it starts. There's a bunch of games Thursday, including. Creighton Prep plays Tapio, if I'm not mistaken, out of memory. And, one of the things that I'm a little worried about, and I don't normally worry about this stuff, but Bill Ramsey had keep an eye out on the weather forecast because we have been so lucky this year, knock on wood, with having decent weather conditions for high school activities. But he said Thursday, not only is there rain in the forecast, but there's lightning for Thursday night. So if that were to interfere with the schedule, I don't know what happens because the schedule's such. That's why we have so many games on Thursdays these days because facilities and officials and all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how Thursday plays out. But yeah, it is a loaded schedule this week. And I'll be interesting to see what really transpires, but the hands down number one game is Millard South and Westside. I'll be interested to see if Millard South can. Everybody looked at the scores last week and said, "Oh, is this a look ahead game?" Because they struggled last week, but I have a feeling they will be ready to roll when Westside comes to town.
Well, don't tell Mike Sauter that they've been lucky with the weather because he had about a 2.5-hour rain delay in Battle Creek on Friday. So I think we've been a little luckier here in the Metro than maybe he was out there in Battle Creek.
Yeah. Well, sometimes don't you think that rain kind of follows certain people? Like Ziggy. Isn't Mike Sauter kind of like that type of person? No,
he's just got a rain. He's got a rain cloud over his head all the time.
Yeah, doesn't he have that type of thing?
Yeah,
like a
sounds
guy
about
with
right.
a big rain. You should be carrying an umbrella with him at all times.
Well, with all the high profile matchups this weekend, I assume. So you said you've got 1 and 2 out in Bennington and Elkhorn North as well. You got enough crew to get everywhere, right?
Well, yeah, at least that's the plan on paper. We'll see, what happens, what you've learned over the years is what happens on Tuesday and what the plans are made on Monday, they can kind of change throughout the week. So at least that's the plan right now. And we should be just about everywhere. The other sneaky game, guys, in Class B is Plattsmouth Scott. All the attention is going to go 1 and 2, but Plattsmouth Scott is a sneaky good game because that's 2 really good teams that are trying to get another crack at the top. And that game's at Scott, 6-1 versus 6-1. I'll be interested to see how that one plays out because I've seen Plattsmouth a couple times, and I know Scott will be ready. 2 good teams going at each other on Friday. Friday's going to be a really. When we started the season, we actually circled this date. Given the bye week, we'd be at, most of the sports staffs would be at full strength. This is probably the week that we had circled before the season started.
Were you surprised at all last week at that score from Kearney, where I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that would be a really good test for Westside going out to Kearney, and then that one was over really early. Did that score surprise you at all? Because I thought maybe that could have been a bit of a look-ahead game for them as well.
100%. And Kearney's traditionally a rock-solid program. They're really good this year.
Yeah, that's number 5 in the state last week, right?
Yeah, 6-0, and I just think Westside is at another level. They're playing at another level right now. Now they have to do it week in and week out, and obviously we'll see what happens this Friday. But when we looked up, we were having a couple of Diet Cokes and a couple slices of pizza down in Champaign when when that game was in progress as the game was progressing, and we looked up and we were like, holy cow, it is 56-0. We couldn't believe it. So, we talked after the game, and Tristan Alvano, he keeps tabs. He keeps tabs. he got the score. He knew his West Side Warriors were winning big. So it is kind of cool. You know what else is cool? You guys, how many local guys, in-state guys, had a hand in that win on Friday for the Huskers? I thought that was cool. Heinrich Harburg and Ty Hahn from Johnson Brock, and the West Side kids with Grant Taggy recovering that fumble, Tristan Albano with the kick. The list goes on and on. And I'm forgetting a whole bunch of people, but the Bullocks, obviously the Bullocks, of course. And it's just cool to see guys that truly care about not to say that other guys from out of state don't care as much, but there's just a different, it's tough to explain, but there's just a different level with guys from Nebraska, don't you think? I mean, guys that talk about guys who are all in, talking about guys who are buried on the depth chart and just fight their asses off to see if they can get playing time someday, because that's been their dream since they were a little kid. And to see those players kind of get their moment, and this is their moment. We got 6 weeks left, and they're going to rely heavily on guys that are from state. And sure, you need to go out and you got to go outside the footprint and get guys in recruiting, but the backbone of your program has been and should always be kids from Nebraska, because you've seen it. They just care.
I mean, it has to be, right? And you think about guys that need to step up in Malachi Coleman, Jalen Lloyd, and they have a really unique opportunity in getting to put themselves on the map and not only represent the end, but also fill a void for the Huskers that they so desperately need in that wide receiver room. Andy, I want to touch a little bit more on the West Side Millard South game. So obviously, I think it'll be the biggest test for West Side this entire season. Millard South, West Side, both 7-0. Going off that Warhorse vein, if there was a spread for this game, what do you think it would be? I need to know, Andy.
That's a great question. You know what? I dabble in the odds making. We kind of have fun with this every once in a while. That's a great question. I would, the odds makers, because it's not about who you think will win. It's what's going to give you the most activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing. I think if I was making a spread, you'd probably want to make it like Michigan-esque when Michigan-esque is playing. Michigan is getting some huge lines just to kind of like, are you really back behind Michigan? Let's see what happens. I would think you would put West Side. I would say West Side by, I think it'd be 3 touchdowns, don't you think?
Really?
Ooh, okay.
I had -14 in my head.
I was thinking like I was going like 16.5, like just over 2, in between that 2 and 3 touchdowns. Maybe there's 17. Maybe I'll go 17.
Okay.
17. People are going to be, Millard South is going to take this as a sign of disrespect. But guys, let's be honest. I mean, West Side has outscored their last 3 opponents, quick math, 160 to nothing. Okay? 160 to nothing.
That's tough to argue with.
They have 4 shutouts on the year. They have 6 games that they've held their opponents to a shutout or 1 score. They're the most points they've been up to 12, and that's the Bellevue West. So, I don't know why, I think 17, I think that's a legit line.
All right. Don't sleep on Millard South, though. They got a killer defense.
Oh, no. I'm not.
No, just the public in general, not you, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Millard South has a chance. Anything can happen on Friday night, as you guys know.
Andy Kendeigh, KETV. We appreciate it, AK.
Thanks.
We've got more for Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
At the same time, Josh Fleeks is ready to play. Emmett put the ball on the ground, which was just disappointing on the exchange. So there's obviously a cultural, and that's why I speak things in here sometimes when I want the locker room to hear it. Like you can't blame all the coaches. Like blame me, that's fine. But like at some point the players have to start saying it. And our players get that. That was what was great yesterday. I talked to our team and said, they wanted to play with a swagger. They wanted to play with energy. They wanted to be, coach, take the leash off us. I'm a little more old school. I said, okay, take the leash off you. Can't have 11 penalties though. Can't have the ball inside the 5 twice. And so I said, hey guys, how do we make this where we can play with a certain energy where we don't have these penalties? And Newsom said, well, we have to do it. And I was like, exactly. That's how you change what's happening. So I think it's the same thing with him technically, but at the same time, he's hear from his teammates like, hey, bro, we need you to hold it this way every single time. So, I'm not going to do the old carry it around the class thing. It's not the program. We're not doing that. We're just going to trust him as a really good player that he can get it correct.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on a Wednesday on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. That's Anna Bellinghausen. And we're brought to you by Dyer Law. If you have a personal injury accident, you can count on Dyer Law and their team to provide you with a helping hand when you need it, no matter what you're dealing with. Call the Dyer Law team at 402-393-7529 or visit dyer.law to chat with trusted professionals about your personal injury claim. That's DYER.law. Wanted to change gears a little bit here as we've been fairly sportsy heavy so far this morning. I don't know why we would do that on a sports talk radio show. But, we're kind of getting to that time of year. It's a little bit of a a chill in the air. I came in here this morning. I was like, am I the only one freezing in
turn
here?
on the heat.
Yeah, I had to kick the heat on a little bit.
Shane's an animal.
He
just doesn't need any heat whatsoever.
Well, I think he's so used to being cold that he brings sweaters and sweatshirts and jackets, and he's ready to go back there. He's got his own little treasure trove of coats and stuff back in his little tree house back there. It's what it reminds me of. It's like one of those, you feel like you're in a tree house, Shane.
You had mentioned it like the other day, I believe to Avery or whatever, but I'm kind of like you when it comes to this time of the year. It gets colder, and I'm like, yeah, that's good, because then I get to wear all my different jackets and stuff. But I'm like, yeah, I'd still rather it be summer.
It's true. I wish I could wear my fall clothes in the summer. That would be kind of me living my best life. But it is the other kind of fun thing about this time of year is you kind of have a little run of holidays here. You got your Halloween, you go Thanksgiving, you go Christmas, you got New Year's. And, a lot of people associate holidays with a specific type of food. So I wanted to play a little Would You Rather game with Anna here to see, to get to know each other a little bit better. It's only the second show we've hosted together. And so you up for that? You ready for some spicy food takes here? Some spicy takes about food, not takes about spicy food.
Yeah, my spicy food takes wouldn't be very good. So
you're not big into spicy food?
Nope, not really.
You're not one of those people that you think black pepper is spicy, right?
No.
Okay, not quite
but
that bad.
I won't get anything above a 3 if I'm getting Thai food or something like that.
Okay, that's totally fair. I usually, honestly, people look at me and they're like, "Oh, you're Indian, you like spicy food?" Not really. I'm very, I'm very bland when it comes to that. I like to taste the food and not just the heat.
Yeah, I wouldn't want anything that would take away from the taste of the food.
Exactly. See, I appreciate that.
I don't enjoy that pain.
No, yeah, I'm not there.
I wouldn't do the hot one challenge. I wouldn't do that.
I don't. So part of my issue with buffalo wings is I don't like the vinegar of the buffalo sauce.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not even a heat thing for me. I just don't like the taste or the smell of vinegar, to be honest. But let's start with Halloween, okay?
I got chills throughout my body.
Thank you, Taylor. Would you rather have Halloween candy or Easter candy?
I'm going to go Halloween because when you say Easter, I think of Peeps, and Peeps are,
ooh, okay. I wasn't thinking about.
In my opinion, disgusting.
Yeah, I wasn't.
And like the eggs, what are the Cadbury eggs?
Oh, see, yeah. So I was thinking of the Reese's eggs.
Oh, well, the Reese's eggs are superior.
Those are the most elite form of Reese's, are the Reese's eggs.
Mm-hmm. But when I think of Easter candy, I'm like jelly beans and stuff like
more
that.
Fruit candies?
Yeah, more fruit candy.
Okay.
And I'm a very big chocolate fan.
Okay.
And that's all I think about when you say Halloween is like
chocolate candy.
Twix, Snickers, Kit Kat. That's pretty much what was in my Halloween basket growing up.
Okay, fair. I think I go Easter here.
Really?
I'm a huge fan of the Reese's eggs, so that is that's a number one draft pick for me. But I think I prefer fruity candy versus chocolatey candy.
Okay.
So
it's different.
I am. I like the jelly beans. So have you ever had, so they make these things now. Have you ever had the freeze-dried Skittles?
I haven't, but I've been seeing them everywhere.
Oh, they're good.
They're good? Okay.
So I loved Skittles as a kid. I don't know if I'm just getting old, but they're really hard to chew now.
Mm-hmm.
They hurt my jaw. So it might just be I'm an old man, or I think they maybe changed the formula a little bit. But the freeze-dried Skittles, you get the exact Skittle flavor, and it's just like a little crunch. It's almost like popcorn if it tasted like Skittles. It's incredible.
Really?
I'm a huge fan of freeze-dried candy.
I'll
Plus,
try that.
you can eat 4 little things and not a whole mouthful, and you're like, oh, that's enough. I'm good.
Okay.
It's nice. I would highly recommend the freeze-dried candy. Question number 2.
Can I say something about the candies?
Yeah, absolutely, Shano.
The biggest difference there, at least in my opinion, is
what's that?
Which makes Halloween better than Easter for candy is that because Halloween candy seems to be more like everyday type of candy, as in you can get that any day of the year compared to Easter candy, which is only like that time of the year.
That's fair.
With the Cadbury eggs and the Peeps and
I'll be totally honest,
that kind of stuff.
I hyper focused on the Reese's eggs, and I totally forgot that Peeps and Cadbury eggs existed.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of those.
Which you're right. That is
But I will say candy corn is disgusting too.
Oh yeah, candy corn is horrifying.
Yeah.
It is. I don't even know why that exists. I don't know why anybody would do that to themselves. Also, Tootsie Rolls are bad.
Yeah,
I like the
great.
fruit
They're
Tootsie
okay.
Rolls. The fruit
Yeah.
Tootsie Rolls are good.
Blue one.
Yeah, the blue and the red and all. But don't come at me with regular Tootsie Rolls.
No.
Nobody can do that.
Yeah, nobody wants that. Bo, nobody wants candy corn. Nobody wants regular Tootsie Rolls. I'm out.
Right there.
Thank you. Question number 2. Would you rather have Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner? This is where we get into a little bit of my food takes that some people are aware of, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Geez, honestly, I don't find too much of a difference between my meals growing up for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
A lot of overlap for you?
Yeah, a lot of overlap. I don't know. My parents must be lacking creativity there, but
well, sometimes you'll get like a ham or something at Christmas as opposed to a turkey
Sure.
or
we always did both because I love ham.
Okay.
So I would go Thanksgiving just because I like the vibe and the football on Thanksgiving is
Sure.
always special. So I think
Absolutely.
I would say Thanksgiving for the ambiance, and it's before Christmas. So
That's true.
get the
It's
meal
sooner.
first.
It's sooner. I do appreciate that. I'm gonna go Christmas here. I somewhat famously do not really enjoy Thanksgiving food.
I can see that.
I don't love turkey.
Mm-hmm.
Mashed potatoes are pretty far down on my potato power
Yep,
rankings.
we've talked about that.
Talked about that last week. Sweet potato pie has changed the game for me a little bit. I do love sweet potato pie. Still love pumpkin pie as well. But I'm not like into cranberries. I'm not into the stuffing. There's a lot of the traditional Thanksgiving foods are not really up my
You
alley.
gotta have good gravy.
Yeah, the gravy is key if you're
Okay,
going on the mashed potatoes. And my wife makes some garlic mashed potatoes that are phenomenal, but I would still rather have like the scallop potato, like the au gratin potatoes. Those are my favorites. But what I like about Christmas dinner is sometimes you can switch out the protein product for like a prime rib or a ham.
That's fair.
Or a lamb.
Mhm.
And if I can get out of the turkey, I'm going to.
Yeah, I'm not a big turkey fan.
It's subpar.
Isn't it kind of funny? I don't know how you grew up, but on Christmas and Thanksgiving, everyone decides that dinner's at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Like it's not at 5 anymore. It's not at 6. It's
And you're
2,
not
it's
doing
3.
lunch.
No, it's one meal, and then you eat those leftovers for the next week.
I think it's honestly, so I always just assumed it's because they couldn't get the food ready in time for lunch just because there was so much to do and you didn't want to wait till dinner to eat. So that was kind of always my assumption. It's like, hey, we're going to eat as soon as it's done, which is going to be somewhere between 2 and 4 p.m. every day. I'll be honest though, I get real snacky. And so I just start kind of, get like a charcuterie board out or something beforehand, which yeah, you might get some mixed nuts in there, Shano. So yeah, I'm going Christmas dinner on that one, but I understand the love for Thanksgiving. I thought you might go Thanksgiving, so this next question is here. Would you rather have Thanksgiving style food for every meal for a year or never have Thanksgiving food again?
Just 1 year of my life.
Yeah, 1 year of your life, it's turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, cranberry, whatever. You don't have to eat it all every time. But those are the only options you get to choose from for a whole year.
So I'd definitely give up turkey though. If it was ham, I'd be a little bit more upset.
We gotta go. We're going traditional.
I'm gonna
turkey.
say never have it again.
Never have it again
because I couldn't do that.
Couldn't do it for a whole year.
Yeah.
You're not one of those people that like hyper fixates on foods and like eat the same thing over and over again.
I do sometimes, but then I'll get like the ick from it, and I'll never want to eat it again.
Oh, for sure.
So that would quickly happen.
You wouldn't want to starve.
Because you're like, wait, what is this?
You're like, I don't.
It's kind of like saying a word over and over again.
Yeah.
And then it becomes not a word.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right in my head.
Eggs kind of freak me out sometimes.
The word eggs or the food eggs?
Probably both.
Okay. You say eggs too many times, you're like, that's not a real word. What's happening here? We'll get last one here. We got about 30 seconds left. Is there a under the radar holiday that low key has really good food?
4th of July.
I agree.
Yeah, hot dogs, hamburgers, barbecue, versatile.
I love hot dogs.
Underrated.
I will go to restaurants and order hot dogs. I love hot dogs. That's a terrific answer from Anna Bellinghausen. That's your food segment for today. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Isaac Trotter, 24/7 Sports National College basketball writer here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Gives to Watson, back to Palmer, shoots the three. Bang! A ring! A ring! JPJ! And the Huskers are now up by 9.
Here comes the double team. Edey passes out of it to Jenkins. 3 on the way for David. In and out and in again. David Jenkins with his 3rd triple of the game.
Rebound to Buffkin. He brings it up the floor, half court, throws it away. Indiana's going to win it. Indiana wins.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Anna Bellinghausen in here with me as well, as we are on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, as well as KFOR in Lincoln for our hour number 3. And we're brought to you by Dingman's Collision Center. Dingman's has been in business in Omaha for over 25 years, family-owned and operated, and voted first place best of Omaha for 18 years running. They've got the latest technology to work on all makes and models. And the best part is they give back with every car repaired. Go to dingmans.com to learn more. And we're hoping to learn more now from our friend Isaac Trotter, the national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports. Isaac, how are you this morning?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I know you were out at Big Ten Media Days yesterday, and you had some really interesting stuff on Twitter. You can follow along at Isaac_Trotter. What were some of the biggest takeaways that you had from just initial reactions on Big Ten Media Days?
Yeah, I think from a Nebraska standpoint, I think Fred Hoiberg really likes his team. I think there's some real optimism here, and I think it's not, unfair. This is a really old team. That was a constant theme that kept coming up with when Hoiberg was meeting with the media, both on Big Ten Network and then also in the breakout session. The experience, the versatility of this team, those are the things he really likes. And I think that there was a real breakthrough toward the end of last year. And when you're able to go into the portal and flex your muscles a little bit and get really old veterans that know how to play basketball, like Green Fast, like Bryce Williams, Josiah Alick, like when you're able to get those type of pieces to build in with the solid core and foundation that you have, I think Fred Hoiberg feels really, really good about his group. And it's arguably, I don't think it's even close, honestly. It's the deepest team that Fred Hoiberg has had at Nebraska. And yesterday we released our Big Ten, preview, and we polled a bunch of league insiders, and Nebraska came out 12th. And I'll be honest, I think it might end up looking a little bit dumb in a couple weeks because Nebraska has a roster here that's really, really old. We saw last year Penn State had the oldest roster in all the Big Ten. They were picked near the bottom of the league at the beginning of the season, and they finished in the NCAA tournament. And I think Nebraska kind of wants to follow that same, game plan, that same roster construction idea.
Isaac, you mentioned they finished 12th in kind of your straw poll. They finished 12th in the Columbus Dispatch preseason poll as well. What in your mind is the ceiling in terms of Big Ten standings for a Nebraska team this year that obviously probably not as talented as the top of the league, but where do you see them fitting in kind of best case scenario?
Yeah, I think that there's 5 teams I feel really, really good about in the Big Ten this year. I think Purdue is in a tier of its own, and then Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin, and Illinois have a lot of veterans back and a lot of high upside, I think, with those 4 teams too. So I think there's 5 teams you feel great about. And then you could convince me that Nebraska could finish as high as 6th or 7th. I think that would probably be the ceiling. And that'd be a really, really good year, kind of a breakthrough year. I think if you're looking from the conference standings perspective, if they can find a way to get to 10-10 in conference play, I think that's a win. Maybe 11-9 would be an outstanding year for Fred Hoiberg and crew. Because you look at the middle of the Big Ten, and, this is a league that has a lot of talent in the middle, but there's also a lot of questions. Ohio State has one of the youngest rosters in all of the Big Ten. They're very talented, but they're really young. Indiana has to replace Trace Jackson-Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino, 2 NBA players who carried a huge load. Now, sure, they loaded up in the portal, but we've seen guys come out of the portal and teams that build heavily through the portal not necessarily pan out. So, everybody kind of expects Indiana to be good. I think there's a floor with Indiana that we're not talking a lot about. Rutgers and Northwestern and Iowa, all 3 of those teams are really good on one side of the basketball, but really bad on the other. So I think when you look at Nebraska, if they can just be solid offensively, I think there's defensive chops here to be decent. I think you're trying to see if you can be just solid enough or offensively where they can get into that 7th and 8th range. Now, what does that take to get there? I think you're looking at Bryce Williams needs to be probably one of the best wings in the Big Ten, and I think he can. The Charlotte transfer, one of my favorite transfers in the Big Ten this year. You need the point guard situation to get cleaned up a bit, and Jamarcus Lawrence is a guy that it feels like Fred Hoiberg and his staff have a lot of faith in. Jaron Coleman could potentially be in that mix as well. And then you need Casey to be Casey, right? And just be one of the best elite shooters in the country. And he was absolutely fantastic down the stretch last year. He had, I think his effective field goal percentage was in the mid-60s for a guard. That was phenomenal in the final 10-plus games of the season. If he's that type of player all year long, and you have these supporting cast pieces like Green Bask steps up and could be an effective Big Ten big man, that's kind of the recipe, I think, for Nebraska to finish in the middle of the Big Ten.
Isaac, from the sentiment you heard yesterday from Nebraska, does it seem like NCAA tournament or bust?
Boy, it's hard to say that it's NCAA tournament or bust, but that's kind of their expectation. That's kind of what it feels like. This is a program that hasn't made the NCAA tournament in a few years, and I think getting onto the bubble would be a really good step in the right direction. But I think it's not unrealistic for Fred Hoiberg to go into this season going, hey, like, making the NCAA tournament is our number one objective, and it's something that we can reach. Again, like I said, old teams win in college basketball, and Josiah Alick is a fifth-year senior. Jaron Coleman is a fifth-year senior. Rink Bask is a fourth-year senior. Juwan Gary, fourth-year senior. Bryce Williams, fourth-year senior. That's a lot of old, established guys that have been in the program and been in college basketball for a long time. And when you're 22, 23 years old and you're playing against some 18, 19-year-olds, that's a real advantage. So I don't think it's unrealistic that Nebraska could work its way onto the bubble. Can they make the NCAA tournament? They're going to have a lot of opportunities to rack up quad one victories in the Big Ten, because Purdue will be great. Michigan State will be great. I think the middle of the Big Ten is going to be good enough that Nebraska is going to have a lot of chances to get double-digit quad one wins.
Isaac, one of those teams that you talked about feeling pretty good about in Wisconsin obviously has the Nebraska connection with Chucky Hepburn. He had some interesting things to say at media days yesterday as well. What were your takeaways from Chucky's time up there?
Yeah, I think he feels a lot better about where the direction of this program is going. And one thing that I'm working on right now is, there are some, allegations that he was going to enter the transfer portal and all of those things and leave. And he really was like, it was funny. He was telling me, he was like, that reminded me of like NBA free agency, because I had no idea where that started. And I was just kind of laughing along with everybody else, like seeing what all these people's opinions were. And so I think he just feels a lot more grounded. And, it's third year in the program. I'm a huge fan of his game. And I think a lot of people looked at him as like the next Johnny Davis, who's going to have a breakout sophomore year. I don't think that was ever realistic. I think he can be like one of those post-type sleepers where, everybody's expecting him to break out last year. This year, the expectations are a little bit lower, and he's able to exceed them and be one of the best point guards in the Big Ten. I just feel like Wisconsin as a whole, you get 5 starters back, you get a really good transfer out of St. John's and A.J. Storr. You could start to see the bones of a team being really good, but they can't reach their ceiling without Chucky Hepburn being one of those elite Big Ten point guards. And I think he's in a better mental headspace, and he's just ready to attack it. I think he can be. And, defensively too, I think he's excellent, and he can be one of the best defensive point guards. So when you have that combination of two-way brilliance, I think Wisconsin has a really high floor, but also a really high ceiling if he's like an all Big Ten guy this year.
Isaac, I'm curious about another team that I think usually has pretty high expectations in Illinois. I guess what have your takeaways been about Coach Underwood with, I guess, what he's done with this program? It seems like they always have pretty high expectations. It doesn't always seem like they live up to those. Where are you on just sort of the job he's done at Illinois so far and where they can go moving forward?
Yeah, I think overall Brad Underwood has done a really, really good job making Illinois relevant again. Mm-hmm. There were some lean years in the 2010s, and now Illinois is starting to, they've made the NCAA tournament multiple years in a row. It would have been 4 years in a row if the NCAA tournament had been canceled due to COVID. Mm-hmm. And they have a roster that could do it again this year. And, they're really old. He's kind of done the Fred Hoiberg thing as well, where he went in the portal and tried to get fifth-year seniors. And so he has 3 fifth-year seniors coming in, and he's brought 2 of his NBA prospects back in Terrence Shannon and Coleman Hawkins. So I think overall Brad Underwood has done a really good job of changing the perception of Illinois basketball nationally and in the league. But I think that everything in the regular season is moot point until he gets the monkey off of his back, so to speak, in the NCAA tournament. And they've won a ton of regular season games. I think they have the most Big Ten wins in the last 4 years combined. No one has more Big Ten wins than Brad Underwood, but everyone continues to talk about March, and it's understandable. And he's built a roster that has a lot of length and athleticism and defense. I think they could be the best defense in the Big Ten. And they need to make the second weekend for people to finally, get off his back a little bit and, give him a little bit more credit for what he's done with this program.
Isaac, I want to take this to a national scale, and speaking to the conference level, there's a lot of talk of which is the best basketball conference across the board. And as someone and myself who covers the Big East regularly, it's easy for me to say, that's the conference. But from your perspective in this upcoming season, who do you think could be that top dog between the Big 10, the Big 12, the Big East, ACC, SEC?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Honestly, I think the Big East, Big 12, and Big 10 have separated themselves as the three alphas in college basketball. I personally think the Big East top-end talent, nobody can match it. I mean, Marquette is phenomenal. Xavier was going to be really good until their front court players both went down with season-ending injuries. But, you still have Creighton, who's going to be awesome. UConn wins the national title last year. St. John's goes and gets Rick Pitino. They're going to be really, really good. Providence gets their best two players back. They'll be really good. So they have three top 10 teams in the country right now, and then a bunch of others that could be really good. The Big 12 is absolutely loaded from, when you add Houston to a Kansas roster that's really, really good and number one in our preseason top 25. You get a perspective of adding, Texas is going to be good for the last year that they're in the league. So I feel like the Big East has more top end, high end talent. But I think the depth in the Big 10 and the Big 12 are slightly better. I think the worst teams in the Big 12 and the Big 10 are better than some of the worst teams in the Big East at this point. But it's a really nuanced conversation, because if we're judging overall talent by what your bad teams are, maybe it's not the Big East. But if we're judging it by how good your great teams are, it's the Big East. And I love that league, and I love watching them because the coaching and the playing, the style and the talent in that league is just off the charts. And I think we're due for a huge year in the Big East.
For sure.
We're talking with Isaac Trotter, the national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports. Staying with the Big East for a second, and ironically talking about their bad teams. One of their bad teams in recent years has been Georgetown. Obviously, they get a huge upgrade in coaching with Ed Cooley. There's a part of me that's always wondered if Ed Cooley could elevate his recruiting at a place other than Providence. Not that he did a bad job getting guys to Providence, but obviously Georgetown has a different profile. What do you expect from him with, at least I think, access to better talent now that he's at Georgetown?
No, that's a really, really good point. I think what Ed Cooley has done a great job of is he does not burn bridges on the recruiting trail. There have been a lot of examples in the past where Providence misses out on a really nice kid in the recruiting process. He picks somewhere else. Bryce Hopkins, right? He picks Kentucky, and that makes sense. But he doesn't burn that bridge. And when Bryce Hopkins went into the portal, Ed Cooley was the place he should have gone. And Bryce Hopkins told literally everybody, he's like, I should have gone there in the first place because Ed Cooley's my guy. Well, he's doing it again now at Georgetown. Jay Epps was a player that he absolutely loved, and Epps ended up picking Illinois, but Cooley didn't burn that bridge. And when Epps entered the transfer portal after a really good freshman year, Georgetown was the place right from the get-go that he was going. So I think that Cooley's done a really, really good job of recruiting guys. People love him. Recruits just absolutely love him. But I think there's a little bit of a bad taste in their mouths when you kind of look at the history of Georgetown. And I think that there's a chance now where he can change that. I don't know how good they'll be this year, not because their roster is horrible, but just because how good some of the other teams in the Big East that they'll have to play. So I think they're going to take their lumps this year. But I don't think it's a situation where Georgetown's going to be bad for a long time, because Ed Cooley's one of the best roster constructors in all of college basketball. And I expect him to be very, very relevant with some of the top, recruits in the country moving forward at a place like Georgetown, because that place wants to win and they want to win big. And I think he's going to have real resources at his disposal.
Isaac, we've been talking about the Big East for several minutes now, and we have yet to mention who was the flagship program of the Big East very recently in Villanova. What are you expecting from Kyle Neptune and the way he's kind of put that roster together in year two? Do you expect a leap from him in that second year running the program?
I definitely do. I should have included them in that top dogs conversation with the Big East, because they're right there with some of the other elite teams. I think we had them right outside the top 10 nationally. They've gone into the portal and crushed it. Hakeem Hart out of Maryland is awesome. Tyler Burton out of Richmond is really good. I think Villanova has the best wings in all of the country. When you throw in Justin Moore and then TJ Bamba out of Washington State, like that 4-wing group right there is excellent. And there's a lot on Kyle Neptune to prove that he can get the most out of his roster. I don't think he did last year. That was a really talented team. Injuries to Justin Moore and to, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on their first round pick, Cam Whitmore, who I absolutely love. Yeah, right. Like injuries to those two guys really kind of impacted their team. But I think also like they didn't necessarily get a ton, they didn't get the best out of that roster. And this year there's no excuses because this team is loaded with really, really talented guys. And I think if they don't finish in the top 4 in the Big East, that's a problem for Kyle Neptune because this roster is one of the 4 best in the league, in my opinion.
Well, I'll have to bring up Creighton now, of course, Ravi. Isaac, as someone who looks at this Big East, and there's incredible depth within this conference as well, and there is some drop-off with the bottom half of the league, but you look at the competition that they're facing day in and day out in conference. When you look at the rankings, the preseason rankings, although they might not matter too much, where would you put a team like Creighton in the Big East? And then I want to know on a national scale too, just from your perspective.
Yeah, I think Creighton is my second favorite roster in the Big East, only behind Marquette. And I think they're like a top 5 to 6 team in the country. Like they are phenomenal. And I think, losing Arthur Kaluma stings for sure. And losing Ryan Nembhard to Arizona, or he transferred to
Gonzaga.
That's correct. The portal is just crazy. It's been a whole long.
It's okay.
Everybody thought he was going to Arizona the whole time.
That's right. Anyway, continue. So like they lose those guys, and that thing. But I think Stephen Ashworth can bring a really interesting factor to what they want in their backcourt. And if losing Ryan Nembhard means that you get more Trey Alexander, I think that's a really good thing for Creighton both now and into the future because Alexander's phenomenal. I think he had the 5th highest usage rate on his own team last year.
Mm-hmm.
That just can't happen. He has got to be one of the most featured players. I think he could be an All-American this year. And don't get me started on Ryan Kalkbrenner, who I think is one of the best players in all of college basketball. I mean, if he wins Defensive Player of the Year in the Big East, he would join Alonzo Mourning and Patrick Ewing as like the only players to ever have done it 3 times. Like he is a phenomenal player. We did a top 100 players list, and we had Kalkbrenner number 3 in the nation. Just with his impact on both ends of the floor is phenomenal.
People put him at number 3 in defenders list.
Yeah, which is crazy.
That is crazy
bonkers.
to me.
That is bonkers. I mean, his on-off splits last year were just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Like Creighton's defense was just insanely good with him on the floor and looked way different with him off the floor. So
yeah.
I just think like when you add like Ashworth and Alexander and Shireman together, Baylor Shireman, you'll be hard pressed to find a better 3-man shooting group in the country. Like they are like bombs away. Could they hit 253s combined this year? Like, I don't think that's crazy. Like, and just that spacing that provides for what their offense is. Like, they have some depth questions, but I like Isaac Trout, the transfer out of Virginia. I think he's going to be a really nice piece for them. If Mason Miller takes a step forward, Fred King is a guy that is one of the best backups in the country. Jonathan Lawson has a ton of length and athleticism. So they have guys on the bench that you like, and Francisco Farabello is trustworthy. And so you have a lot of those pieces there in place that this team might be deeper than they were last year. And I think Ashworth could end up being, maybe more useful than Nembhard. And maybe that sounds a little bit weird, but just from a schematic fit with his ability to shoot threes off pick and rolls, I think it's going to work really, really well.
Isaac, want to ask you about kind of your national perspective. How many teams do you think can legitimately have hopes of winning the national title this year? Is there kind of I guess in your mind, is this one of those years where there's a couple teams in a clear-cut tier 1, or is there a little more parity at the top in your mind this year?
Man, that's a really good question. I think I go into this year thinking Kansas and Duke and Marquette have to be involved in every single, national championship thing. I think I'd throw Purdue in there, Tennessee, Michigan State, Creighton, Connecticut. Like that's like 8 teams right there that I feel really good about. So it's different compared to the past. And I think a lot of it is retention, right? Like retention of some of your elite players. Creighton gets 3 of their most important players back. UConn gets Donovan Clingan back and adds an awesome class. Michigan State gets a bunch of guys back. Purdue gets Zach Edey back. Duke gets Tyrese Proctor and Kyle Filipowski back. Marquette, Tyler Kolek, and Olivier or Oso Ighodaro come back. Those are 2 huge pieces for them. Kansas gets DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams, Kevin McCullough back. And the number 1 transfer in the portal and Hunter Dickinson. So I think those 8 teams are pretty old, pretty talented, except for UConn. UConn isn't old, but they're super, super talented. But those other 7 are old, talented, with a lot of retention. And I think those teams are set up to be really successful this year. And I can't wait for this season to get started. Like, this is going to be so much fun this year because there are some elite teams that are going to be duking it out in conference play all year long. And then March is obviously going to be loaded. So I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. And we only have 3 more weeks to wait.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac, I'm super excited about the start of the season. I'll get you out of here on this one. We've talked a lot about Big East teams, about the coaches that are in the league now. I guess, where would you rank Coach McDermott from Creighton in that hierarchy of what is really a loaded Big East and head coaches?
Man, that's a loaded question. I think
don't want to get you in trouble here, but
I mean, offensively, if you're just going straight pure offensive coach, he's
number 1, right?
I think so. I don't think that's crazy to say that he's the best offensive coach in the conference. So and then how do you factor in longevity? Because Rick Pitino obviously has the most wins of any coach in college basketball, active coach in college basketball right now. So I'm not really good at the ranking things. I prefer tiers. There's no way that you could go through the tiers of Big East coaches and not have Greg McDermott as a tier 1 alpha coach. He is one of the best coaches in the country offensively, and I think defensively. I really like some of the schematic things that they've done. Obviously, it helps to have a player like Ryan Kalkbrenner who makes life so much easier. Right. But I like what he brings to the table. And, I think that moment last year that they caught on video after they lost in the Elite 8, I thought that was a really touching moment, saying hey, we'll be back. This is just the beginning for Creighton basketball. And I don't think that's the easiest job in the country, but McDermott makes it look pretty easy, and he's been able to build this into a monster, and I think they're going to have a huge year. So there's not many coaches in the Big East that I'd want more than Greg McDermott, just with what he does on the offensive end of the floor.
Isaac Trotter, great stuff from you. We appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll talk to you again as the season moves on.
Sounds good. Anytime.
That's our friend Isaac Trotter from 24/7 Sports, national college basketball writer. Man, ton of great stuff there. We covered a lot of ground from Big Ten Media Days to the Big East and kind of everything in between. Really appreciate Isaac's time there. All right, coming up next, we will have more of Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln.
We will be back. We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Anna Bellinghausen joining me here today on it's Wednesday, right? Still Wednesday?
It's Wednesday.
Okay. Just making sure. Sometimes the weeks get away from me. I want to tell you about our friends over there at Rockbrook Camera. They are not just about selling you a camera. They're about trying to help you become the best and the best photographer you can be for whatever that means for your life, whether you're just recording your memories and sharing your life with others, or if you're trying to be a professional photographer, Rockbrook Camera has you covered. They've got support after the sale, including monthly classes to help you learn all the things you need to know. They also have the latest technology, such as mirrorless cameras, to get you going. You can trade in your old gear to upgrade, or if you're just trying to rent something for a special occasion or to try something out, they've got an extensive rental department as well. Check them out, rockbrookcamera.com, or go to one of their two locations, Omaha 168th and Center, or Lincoln 70th and Pioneer. Wanted to get to another thing that I saw in the NBA last night. And, I'm not generally an NBA preseason, I'm not one of those people. I do love the NBA. And sorry, I got something in my eye here. I don't know what's happening. If you see me blinking a lot on camera, that's what's going on here. I'm not a huge NBA preseason guy. I don't think you get a ton out of it, but last night, Dylan Brooks, who is not one of my favorite people on the planet in terms of NBA players, got ejected for punching another player in a place you should not punch people. Shouldn't punch people at all, but there's some particularly sensitive areas, then Dylan Brooks chose to punch there. I don't like to use the word hate very much. Dylan Brooks really tests my patience with that. Him and Patrick Beverley are both like right there. And, I was trying to figure out why he bothers me so much. And I think I landed on this idea that he sort of lets his, we'll call it chippiness, to be kind to him. I think he let those guys let that define who they are as basketball players. And it really frustrates me because obviously Dylan Brooks, Patrick Beverley, whoever, had some level of skill set to get to where they are. You don't get, Dylan Brooks went to Oregon. You don't go play Power 5 college basketball. You don't end up in the NBA if you don't have some level of skill, right? And I think sometimes these guys sort of lose the thread of what got them there. It's like, yes, they have an edge and they're competitive, but I don't remember Dylan Brooks being like this at Oregon. Maybe I just missed it, right? But it's not like I paid a ton of attention to Memphis Grizzlies basketball more so than I did Oregon, or now with the Rockets with Dylan Brooks. And I get really frustrated because it seems like this happens not just with guys that are chippy, borderline dirty, but I feel like it happens not just with basketball, but kind of a lot of things, right? Where people misidentify what is leading to success, or they misidentify what they're seeing, or they don't really, they think something is happening for a certain reason, and that's really not what's happening. And for Dylan Brooks, I think he thinks that being chippy, borderline cheap is what keeps him in the NBA. It's like, no, you're a 6'6" guard that is, reasonably athletic. You play hard. You're a pretty decent shooter, and you can defend pretty well. Like, that's what keeps you in the NBA. Obviously, being competitive is a part of that, but like, you're not in Memphis anymore because of the crap, right? Like, that's why they moved on from you, because of all the crap. And so, I think they see guys like Dennis Rodman or Draymond Green and say, oh, well, he did it this way. It's like, no, those are two of the most elite defenders this game has ever seen. Draymond Green is a wizard, like an actual genius passing the basketball. That's why he's in the league. It's not because he, swipes at LeBron while he's standing over him, or that he gets all these technicals or whatever. Like, he's in the league despite all that crap rather than because of it. And I don't know, I just feel like we see this all the time where guys don't even understand the reason they got where they are. And it is, I think it's one of the things that drives me the most crazy about sports is, and maybe it comes down to a self-awareness thing. Like, I'm very big on self-awareness, and these guys just don't seem to have it at all. I mean, does that make any sense?
No, I understand where you're coming from. And I mean, there's other examples that come to mind. I know we talked before the show about Barry Bonds. And while that's a different reason with the steroids, you can't deny that he was an amazing athlete, right?
Sure.
And plate discipline and everything like that, and the power.
And people just see him and they go, oh, steroids.
Right. And there's different lenses to look at it. I mean, examples that come to mind of that, chippy behavior, that attitude that fans sometimes don't enjoy, at least opposing fans don't enjoy.
Sure,
I mean, Christian Laettner, Grayson Allen, two big examples in college basketball that just had that attitude that, I mean, in the Christian Laettner era, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but he was kind of one of the first people to really be more outspoken in that college basketball realm and really show his emotions on the court and be that kind of chippy attitude player and do dirty things once in a while on the court that, got him in some bad light. But I don't think that denies the fact that he's a great ball player, still had not the most amazing, but a good NBA career.
Long NBA career.
Had a long NBA career. I mean, Grayson Allen still going, just got traded. And I mean, in football, Johnny Manziel comes to mind too, right? Like a guy that was painted in a bad light, probably for some good reason. Obviously, if you watch a documentary, there is some mental health reasons there and issues there but you couldn't deny that Johnny Manziel was a phenomenal athlete.
Yeah, had talent.
He had talent, right? Whether or not he chose to use that's up to him. But I think there is merit to what you're saying, Ravi, in the fact that all the off the court stuff does affect your performance, but you can't stray away from, like you said, what got you there. That God-given talent, that's something you can't replicate. But I think it gets clouded in how athletes portray themselves, whether they're speaking out on a press conference or they're tweeting something
or
they shouldn't be tweeting.
Every
after
athlete has
game.
a podcast now, right?
Right, and stuff like that. It's just, you should express yourself and you should use your platform, but I think you also have to understand that it does affect the way your teammates view you, maybe if fans view you. But if you stay true to your values and how you play, I think that's fine. And maybe sometimes the media does paint people in bad lights that don't deserve it. So I think there's give and take there.
Dylan Brooks definitely deserves it, by the way. But
he did something outwardly, right? Yeah, you can't spin that one way or the other.
Yeah, and he's got a history of it, right? But Johnny Manziel's an interesting one that I hadn't thought of, because he probably thought the reason he was successful was like his swagger and his confidence, and obviously that bled into all areas of his life, right? But in order to do what he did with literally no practice and no preparation whatsoever, he had to be not only a really high level athlete, but he had to process the game in a way that really allowed him to be successful without having done his homework, basically. Yeah. And so for him to be able to be that successful without doing any of the work, if he had actually done the work when he got to the NFL, it kind of makes you wonder, like, how good could he have been?
I think about that all the time,
right?
If you picked up the playbook, for example, right, and read some plays,
or watched any film, right?
Yeah, and watched any film, and didn't show up to practice or games hungover, like the documentary mentioned, right? Like,
yeah.
How good could he have been? We don't know that.
Yeah.
But his heart wasn't in it, and that's.
Which is totally fine,
all
right?
That was written.
If that's what's best for his life, like, cool. I don't have an issue with that. But it does where it bothers me is guys like Dylan Brooks that we mentioned, like Patrick Beverley, or like this is kind of a different take on it, but we had this whole generation after Michael Jordan of guys just wanting to play ISO basketball, right? Like go one-on-one, which, listen, Michael Jordan did plenty of, especially early in his career, but it does kind of ignore how some of the game shifted as he, as Phil brought in the triangle and stuff like that. Not that he wasn't still a ball dominant guy, but you had this whole generation of like your Tracy McGrady's and your Vince Carter's and your Kobe Bryant's and all these guys who were so ISO ball dominant type guys, and not really realizing that, like, yeah, that's how Michael Jordan did it, but that's not necessarily what made him special. That was just kind of the method of it, right? Steph Curry is another good example, right? You have all these guys wanting to shoot the ball from 30 feet now. It's like, okay, first of all, Steph Curry is a unicorn. Yeah. Like, I know we usually talk about unicorns with like 7-footers that have ball skills and stuff like that. Steph Curry is as much of a unicorn as anybody. And it's not just that he shoots the ball from deep. It's all of the other things about his game that make him special. But now you see a guy shooting from 30 feet and you're like, oh, it's another Steph Curry. And it's like, no, you don't understand what's happening here. So I don't know. I think it's a super frustrating thing about the way I process sports, and hopefully Dylan Brooks can stop hitting people in the goods, and we'll have a nice successful NBA season here. Coming up next, we are going to talk to our friend Avarie Howard. She was at Summit League Media Days with Anna, and we will probably talk a little Husker football with her as well. Coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome. Welcome back. Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. We are wrapping up the show here on a Wednesday. I'm Ravi Lulla, Anna Bellinghausen here with me as well. We are joined now by our friend Avarie Howard of Hurrdat Sports. Avarie, how are you this morning?
Hey guys, good morning.
Hey, what are you up to this fine morning when you don't have to wake up at like 5 o'clock to come host a radio show with me?
I'm heading to work.
Well,
at a normal hour.
I was at a reasonable hour for normal people.
Yeah, at a normal hour. It's, a little bit appreciated this morning. Thanks, Anna. It worked.
Hey, yeah, you're welcome.
Isn't it weird? Like when you sleep you sleep till like 7:30 and you're like, oh man, it was nice to sleep in this morning.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, 7:30 came around. I either felt like I'm missing something, or I was like, well, now what do I do?
So I will say, I'll just say there's been 2 Saturdays in the last like 3 weeks where I've woken up at like 7:15 in a full-blown panic attack thinking I had missed the show. So it's don't get to that point, Avarie. It's not a ton of fun.
You know, I've just recently got past that from soccer, I think, where I wake up and I'd either be like in a, you know, when you're about to wake up, like fearful dream, like I've missed film, I've missed the bus, I'm late to practice. I still get those. So I'm not completely out of the woods on that one yet.
Well, so see, you fit right in then. That works out.
Yeah.
So you
yeah,
were
we're
up.
all in it together.
You were up at Sioux Falls with Anna yesterday for Summit League Media Days. Just what were your overall impressions? I know it was the first year of them doing it this way. What were your impressions of the event and kind of how it went?
Honestly, it was fantastic. I really think this is a step that the Summit League needed, and I know that's how, the guys that run this league have been feeling for a little while as well, and making sure this league is getting the recognition it deserves. And I think we heard that from top to bottom from every coach that we heard yesterday and every player, that this is a really talented league. Like, there's no game off. There's no days off. It's really a fast-paced game. It's a physical game. And so I'm really happy that this event really gave some credit and just recognized the players and the talent that are in this league. So it was really cool. It wasn't necessarily formal like you see like the other big conferences. It wasn't just like, put a coach up on a podium and have him ask a ton of questions. It was much more conversational, and they kind of did a whole lap of stuff around the court. It was cool. It was radio stuff, it was interviews, it was fun stuff. So we got to engage in a lot of things. So I think for a first year, you can definitely say it was a success.
Avery, out of everyone we talked to, which we talked to, 20 plus people, anyone stick out in particular that's not from Omaha? We can't name Omaha people.
Yeah, okay. I think I told you this yesterday. I absolutely loved the UMKC head coach. Like, first of all, she could talk to me all day long. Like, her voice was like fantastic. It was incredible. I would listen to her as my head coach any day. But she just, as a second year head coach, it just feels like she's got an alignment with her players, and just the way she approaches taking over this program, it was really motivating to me. And I just liked how she was really conscious of how to just connect on these players on a different level. She talked about meeting them where they are, not making them feel like when they're in her office, like they're in trouble, going and hanging out with them, bringing her family around. So those are really important things as a very new head coach. And I was just really impressed, especially as a coach and a team that's picked to finish last in the league. So, she's like, that's fine. That's okay. That means we have a lot of room to prove people. So I think that was really impressive to hear from her. And I also really enjoyed St. Thomas's head coach and the player they brought. They're entering into a new era here as well, kind of getting comfortable in Division I. But the way that they're viewed, what this means to them is, they're the ones leading the way. Like, the player talked about how, I'm going to tell my grandkids about this someday, that I was in the transitioning period of playing D1 basketball, and they take that with a lot of pride. The last one is Casey Baravich. There we go. From North Dakota. I really just liked her poise, and she's going to be the preseason player of the year, and she just kind of took it with a lot of grace and took it with a grain of salt as well. And I just am really excited to watch them all come to Baxter this year and kind of see how it all plays out.
Avery, I'm curious, have you noticed or did you kind of think that at a mid-major media days like Summit League, did you find that people were kind of more open and a little bit more loose and comfortable talking to you? It seems like at some of these, Big Ten or some of the larger media days that, coaches and players tend to be pretty tight-lipped, a lot of coach speak, stuff like that. Did you notice a difference there?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was even brought up to us by a few of the coaches. They really liked that it was different, and it wasn't a podium style where, they just have to, answer off all these questions that are fired away. And, they really appreciated the preparation that went into it. And I think they just appreciated getting some of attention. And I do think because it was the first year and it just was an exciting event, I hope it would stay that way. But it felt like everyone was really open to a lot of conversation, and they don't really get the time a ton to talk to different outlets that aren't within their area, just about the makeup of their team. We're just like, talking to SDSU about their wonderful run last year, and they were more than willing to want to talk about that, and just, even what the struggles of this year might look like. And so I think they definitely were open, and I think just the conversation style that the Summit League came up with was very beneficial to them as well.
Avery, we'll switch gears for you a little bit here, as you don't believe you're doing a review and a preview video this week since it's a bye. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the Illinois game. Obviously, pretty sloppy in some of the execution there, but I still thought there was some real positives Nebraska could take away from that victory in Champaign. How did you process that?
Yeah, and also I think the thoughts that I had at the beginning of the week, I think were followed up by what Coach Rule said yesterday, because I said earlier this week that nonetheless, this was a game about who could respond. Both teams coming off two unfortunate and huge losses. And, they had these major internal weeks, the week leading up to that Illinois game, where they had to do a lot of looking in the mirror and getting back to some basics. And so it was going to be who can come out and really prove that. And I told you, just by observation, there was just a different fire and a different spark about this Nebraska team coming into someone else's house and losing in the game they did against Michigan. It didn't really feel like that deterred them too much. And so that's kind of what impressed me the most. But like I said, with how Coach Rule kind of followed up with those comments, is he's like, the guys wanted us to kind of let them go be freely and play freely and have that fire. And I guess from Coach Rule said, he's like, I've told them they've got to go prove some things before they go celebrate, when it's not just with the team, when it's with the crowd and all the boisterous stuff. And I think we kind of saw that against Illinois. They played with a just different kind of confidence. And yes, it was sloppy and stuff, but now you have to figure out, I think, how you mix all of the technical stuff with, mixing in the fun stuff as well, if that's what makes this team go.
Avery, we were talking about this earlier, just with the depleted wide receiver room, running backs, etc. Matt Rule did mention that this is kind of the first time he's had this many injuries faced in a season. Do you think Nebraska can find its offensive identity maybe later in this season, or is it not even maybe worth finding completely? And you don't want to set anything in stone because you don't know what this team's going to look like and who can step up, but do you think it's okay if Nebraska doesn't necessarily nail down, hey, this is what we're doing this season, but I still have this long-form plan of where Matt Rule wants his offense to be?
Yeah, I think that's probably the latter there. And me and Robbie talked this last week. I think they kind of view identity a little bit different than we do. Their identity is they know what they want Nebraska football to look like, and they're going to strive to get there piece by piece. And I think now, because they've lost some of those pieces, they do have to figure out, okay, how is this still possible to achieve what we want to achieve in year one, or achieve what our identity is going to look like in 2-3 years. But I don't think it means let's stray away and completely just, chuck the game plan and just kind of figure out whatever works right now. I mean, they do have to do that to a certain extent, right? They're going to run the ball. We know that. I think it's really unfortunate after we saw, some bigger chunk plays, some more explosive plays, at least shots down the field against Illinois. And I do think they still have weapons to do that. It just won't be maybe as much as I think fans were hoping to continue to see that grow in that area. But nonetheless, I don't think they're going to say, hey, let's just scrap our identity this year and then we'll kind of try again next year. I think they're going to have to implement it in ways that they can still build off of, right? So using the people they still have, cleaning up the things they can still clean up. And then I think this also is a huge opportunity for those younger guys that Rule has a ton of confidence in, that maybe they're the ones that reestablish what this identity was going to look like for this offense. Coach Rule said, we think they're going to be great players for us. We just didn't know it was going to be right now. So, they're here now. So might as well use them. And maybe depending on how the next few games go in terms of their performance, it might switch up what offense looks like for Nebraska in the next few years.
Avery, real quick, about 30 seconds here. What is something you're hoping to see accomplished in this bye week in terms of improvements?
I think just the things that need to be cleaned up. And I know that's already something that's being addressed. They're already going to pay attention to those things. And Northwestern knows they're going to do that. And Northwestern's also coming off a bye week too. So this is another head-to-head challenge where which team can come out of this fired up and do the things right.
Avery Howard, Hurrdat Sports. Avery, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
That's our friend Avery Howard from Hurrdat Sports. I mean, you'll see her probably in like 10 minutes when you go to work.
Oh, yeah.
Anna, we appreciate you coming in again, as always. And I don't think I screwed up your name once today.
You killed it.
Nice. So proud of myself. I'm Ravi Lulla. That's Anna Bellinghausen. Shane Schillerberg producing for us. This has been Hurrdat Sports Radio.